Part 58. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 586. Half an hour later. In the ice house temporarily condensed by Lan Shui, the beauty hummed comfortably, making a sweet and lazy hum. Her thick and curled eyelashes trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes. In the field of vision, Musian's rather delicate and handsome profile was reflected. His breath was still very stable, but at this moment he was sitting beside her, holding her waist with one hand, looking up at the sky, as if thinking about life. The natural furnace of the Yahua realm was really powerful. It made her originally exhausted and weak spiritual consciousness seem to be nourished by a lot of spring water at once, and her originally sluggish state was radiant at this moment. Compared with Lan Shui's slightly pale face at the beginning, her face at this moment has added a few faint blushes, looking full of energy, and more mature and beautiful. Are you not satisfied yet? Aware of Lan Shui's strange look, Musian couldn't help but turn his head and asked with a smile. Lan Shui shook his head gently. I have always wondered why Lianer and Feiying are so obsessed with you. Now I understand a little bit. It's not just because of the natural furnace, but Musian knows how to make girls happy. Although Lan Shui thinks that some of his words to make people happy are childish, they still make people feel a little happy. This is something that the ancestors of the Lan clan have never experienced in the past. I was just thinking about what to do if someone approaches here, so I am not in a very good state, Musian said. You mean, if you are not outside, your state will be much better than now. Lan Shui chuckled, and his fingertips stirred a strand of hair as if nothing had happened. He raised his beautiful eyes casually and smiled. Then should we go back first? The voice was soft and pleasant, and he looked at Musian with his eyes full of smiles. In addition, the slightly red face with lingering charm showed a lot of desire. Senior, you finally left Xianhuang Mountain. It's okay to relax before going back, right? Musian shook his head and smiled. And you brought me to Taishu Lake, isn't it because there is something here that you want me to see? Lan Shui's smile was slightly restrained. He looked at Musian meaningfully and said faintly, you are really quick to react sometimes. I brought you here not just to relax. As she spoke, she covered her full and upright chest with one hand. Her flawless skin like white jade was covered by the crystal blue dress, which also covered her originally exquisite and graceful figure. At the same time, the ice house that had just been temporarily built also quietly dissolved, and a calm lake appeared in the field of vision. The sky was a little gloomy, and Musian suddenly felt that there seemed to be a misty black fog under his feet that was slowly moving from a distance. The black fog soon spread over the entire Taishu Lake. Musian frowned slightly, as if he remembered something. The last time he and his senior sister went boating on Taishu Lake, they seemed to have encountered a similar situation, and then they found themselves on a mysterious ancient ship. What is this? Musian asked subconsciously. You will know when you go in, Lan Shui said slowly and calmly. The lakeside filled with black fog was like nightfall. A painting boat with red lights appeared quietly on Taishu Lake, swimming and gliding slowly. Is this also the second arc? Musian asked subconsciously. He could feel a very familiar breath in this boat, which was very similar to the second arc he had boarded before. Let's go in first, Lan Shui smiled. Although he still had some psychological shadows about this painting boat, since Lan Shui did not explain directly, Musian could only restrain these messy thoughts and follow her into a small room in the painting boat. The layout of the room was quite elegant, completely different from the gloomy feeling imagined. Senior, what exactly are you bringing me here for? Musian subconsciously looked up at Lan Shui, who was not far ahead. Don't worry, the environment here is so good, it's not too late to calm down and have a cup of tea before considering these things, right? Lan Shui smiled indifferently, and walked to Musian's side with the brewed tea slowly and calmly. She had a soft figure, and the icy dress added a bit of cool temperament. I remember that you and Lianer did some intimate things here last time, right? Lan Shiwei continued. Puff. Musian almost choked on the tea he had just drunk. He looked at Lan Shiwei strangely, and noticing the woman's slightly teasing smile, he said helplessly, "Senior, please don't make me happy." Lan Shiwei smiled, "I just feel a little emotional, not deliberately making you happy. Last time you were walking with Lianer by the Taishu Lake, and now, you are walking with me, and we are." Before Lan Shiwei finished speaking, Musian had already gently placed his hand on the back of her hand and whispered, "Senior, since it is rare for us to come out to relax together, let's not talk about Senior Sister's affairs now. You don't have to feel guilty, I think Senior Sister will understand. Only the natural furnace can warm up the spiritual consciousness well. For this reason, as a good child who is filial to the ancestors, even if Lan Murian knew about the things between her ancestors and Musian, she would probably not say anything. That Senior Sister is a typical arrogant person who is cold on the outside and hot on the inside. In the past, when facing Musian, she often said that he was just my junior brother. However, when we got to bed, she no longer called her junior brother." Lan Shiwei's eyes softened slightly, and she said quietly, "They are indeed very good children. Even if they know the truth, they won't be dissatisfied." After pondering for a moment, she seemed to have made up her mind. She raised her hand to form an ice mirror and handed it to Musian. "What's this?" Musian took the ice mirror and took a look. What was reflected in the ice mirror was not his own face, but a map. "Is this Kyushu?" Musian's eyes moved slightly, and he saw that the map was constructed to be the current Kyushu. However, this seems to be the earliest Kyushu, so the map plates look a little different from now. "You'll find out if you keep reading," Lan Shiwei said softly. Musian continued to stare at the map emerging from the ice mirror with some doubts in his heart. This seems to be the evolution history of Kyushu. The map plate of Kyushu will undergo slight changes every few thousand years, and the map shown in this ice mirror is the evolution process of Kyushu from its birth to the present. Gradually, the map shown in the ice mirror has evolved from the original 9 states to today's 9 major states. Musian still couldn't understand why Lan Shiwei was looking at the map for him. At this moment, the map in the ice mirror fluctuated violently like an earthquake. Then, the map that had evolved into this world was quietly reset and returned to the original Kyushu. Musian's pupils shrank, staring at the Kyushu that was beginning to evolve again, and whispered, "What on earth does this mean?" "As you can see, Kyushu has restarted," Lan Shiwei said. "What does restart mean?" "Restart means restarting," Lan Shiwei said. "Sister, what you just said seems to be a sentence." Seeing that Musian seemed a little confused, Lan Shiwei said slowly under Musian's astonished gaze, "To put it more bluntly, the world, including the entire Kyushu, has been restarted once. What you see now is the world of the second week." "Second week? It sounds a bit like playing some kind of game." Musian frowned. Lan Shiwei thought for a while and suddenly smiled brightly, "For those who restart the world, this is probably just a game." As he spoke, Lan Shiwei revealed a secret that made Musian fall into a daze for a long time. The so-called second game is similar to the feeling of restarting the game after encountering a bad ending in the game. And Lan Shiwei was the one who witnessed the world restart once in the second arc. "Will you not be affected by the world restart in the second arc?" Musian asked. "The 9 forbidden lands, as well as the second arc, and in heaven, will not be affected by the restart." Lan Shiwei said, "Because there is time material in the second arc, it is not affected. The human emperor in the Ascension realm controls the principle of time, so it will not be affected by the restart. In other words, only those who can control the law of time are immune to the effects of restart." "Lan Shiwei, have you ever heard of déjà vu?" The so-called sense of déjà vu means that you have met someone in your previous life, and you were friends or Taoist companions with her. But after you meet her in this life, you will feel familiar and déjà vu, but this maybe it's not that they look familiar, but that you were indeed friends or Taoist companions when we met each other, but you just don't remember each other. The queen of the demon realm seems to be like this. She has no intersection with him in this life. However, the queen of the demon realm said that she and he were Taoist companions in the previous life. Musian felt a little enlightened at this moment. The person who restarts the world is the sect master, Musian asked. I have no idea. Lan Shiwei shook his head and said, it's just that after I witnessed everything in the second arc, someone came to me. She told me that if I cooperate with her, she will help me regain my physical body and ascend to heaven in the future. Is it the sect leader? What kind of deal did you make with her? Musian asked doubtfully. Lan Shiwei glanced at him and said, she just asked me to stay in the second arc. There was no more specific content. Actually, I didn't believe the cake she drew at first, but she swore to the road at that time, so I had to believe it. Lan Shiwei looked at Musian faintly and said, but I didn't know until today that she really didn't lie to me. Concubine Shangyan's scheming is so deep that no one can see through it. Lan Shiwei's intention to get close to Musian this time was just to unite her body. At first she thought she was relying on herself, but now that she thinks about it, Musian's appearance may be that concubine Shangyan is fulfilling her promise. So, have you also witnessed the Blue Clan's two transitions from prosperity to gradual decline? Musian asked subconsciously. Lan Shiwei nodded slightly. In fact, there was another thing she was very strange about. Why did Shangyan Fei not fulfill her promise in the last week, but waited until this life to fulfill her promise? If concubine Shangyan is really the manipulator behind the scenes, then concubine Shangyan can completely guide Musian to meet her in the ancestral land of the Blue Clan, and then help her gather her physical body. But why do you have to wait until this week to do this? Is there any special reason? After all, it seems that in the last life in Kyushu, the name Musian was not heard of. Unlike this life, things about Musian are being spread everywhere in Kyushu. Musian was thinking about what Lan Shiwei said today. When he came back to his senses, he noticed the woman's gaze and couldn't help but subconsciously asked, what's wrong? Have you thought of something? Lan Shiwei smiled, actually, I have never been able to understand why Lianer and Fei Ying both fall in love with the same man. Musian raised his eyebrows slightly, you mean you understand now? The candlelight in the wing was swaying and it was quite quiet. On the soft mat, Lan Shiwei's shoulder was gently next to Musian's. She was wearing a long dress, her breasts were plump, and her hair fell lazily on her snow-white shoulders. She picked up the wine glass on the table, raised her lazy and charming eyes, and said softly, I understand, you are indeed good at making women happy. Before Musian could speak, she said again, besides, it can also satisfy me. These words are so helpful to men, especially when the person who speaks is the ancestor of the Blue tribe. Not long ago, she was scolding them in front of her own tribe, but now she is nestled in Musian's arms, looking obedient and obedient. Posture. Burning, it's really burning. Originally, he thought he was almost satisfied today, however, now, Musian suddenly wanted to unlock the ancient ship CG again. It's great to be young, so energetic. Realizing that the young man beside her seemed to be a little bit agitated, Lan Shiwei couldn't help but pursed her lips and smiled, were you like this when you were with other women before? Musian shook his head gently, I think it's just because you are so charming, in fact, I have always been a relatively reserved person. Lan Shiwei looked at Musian with a smile, too charming? The monks in Kyushu have always believed that the Qing Emperor's beauty is unparalleled. Wouldn't it be like this if you were with her? Musian was silent for a while. Unexpectedly, this beautiful ancestor also knew a lot about him. In fact, not only with Yao Meng, but also when he was with Naxi in the past, he often still had some desires after finishing things. Of course, this actually depends on the person. If it is a beauty like Yao Mang, Naxi, or Sister Mengru, it doesn't matter if they are intimate a few more times. After all, their physiques can support it. But Musian was reluctant to waste girls like Xianer and Lingxian, in other words, because their realm was too low at the time, their bodies were too delicate and they could not completely satisfy Musian. But if it's Lingxuan's sister who has become the queen of the restricted area, she should be able to bear it even if she gets close to him a few more times. Even if it doesn't work, she can use the taboo rules to forcefully change her weak state. I just don't know if she can use the taboo rules to make her breasts grow again. Musian couldn't help but smile knowingly after thinking of this interesting thing. Ever since he learned that Ye Lingxian had a relationship with him in previous lives, he felt that he would reunite with her again in this life, and it might be his destiny. He still vaguely remembers some experiences he had with Ye Lingxian a long time ago. Perhaps, this is what Lan Shiwei calls the sense of déjà vu. Just when he thought of this, Musian seemed to suddenly remember something important, and the smile on his face suddenly froze. "Senior, you just said that the current Zhuzhu is the world of Zhoumu, right?" Musian suddenly asked. Lan Shiwei hummed softly, thinking that he was still doubting the matter, so he said again, "You don't have to doubt that I am deceiving you. I was indeed in the second arc and witnessed the restart of the entire Kyushu. I can swear." Musian's face seemed to be distorted, and he murmured to himself, "It's not that I doubt you, it's better to say that I believe what you said. It's just that I suddenly thought, are you really sure this is just the second round?" Musian raised his head slowly, "Or, are you sure that this world really only restarted once?" So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 587. As Musian finished speaking, the small room fell into a brief silence. The candlelight flickered gently, illuminating Lan Shiwei's cold and beautiful face. Compared with Lan Murian, this woman seemed to have more mature charm and less girlish innocence. If Lan Shiwei and Lan Murian walked on the street, I'm afraid many people would think they were a pair of sisters or mother and daughter. "Why do you think this world has been restarted more than once?" Lan Shiwei broke the silence and asked softly. "When I went to the Dongzhou restricted area with Lingxian before, I accidentally learned something." Musian said softly, "Sister Lingxian is also my Taoist partner. But not in this life, but 9 lives ago, Ye Lingxian, who had not yet been reincarnated, had become my Taoist partner. But I was sealed in the Forbidden Land for tens of thousands of years, and I never left the Forbidden Land during this period. How did I become a Taoist partner with them?" Musian said again. This is also the biggest reason why Musian had this doubt. He had been wondering before, if he had been sealed in the Forbidden Land by Mu Wanji, how did he get to know the girl in his previous life? Did he sneak out during the seal? But after Lan Shiwei said restart, Musian had another guess in his mind. Before, Musian often had some very strange hallucinations, a feeling like I have seen this woman before. But now it seems that it may not be an illusion, but he did experience some things with Ye Lingxian and others in the past, but when the world was restarted, everything was reset. From the first round to the second round, and then to the third round, someone was constantly restarting the whole world. And in this life, a woman named Mu Wanji appeared and sealed him in the Forbidden Land. The master said before that every time a butterfly flaps its wings, it may affect the direction of the future. In other words, every time the world restarts, it means that the future results will change due to some small actions. Musian said, "Maybe you have never boarded the second arc in the past, but you boarded the second arc until a certain round." Lan Shiwei's eyes flickered slightly, and he said softly, "So in my opinion, the world has only restarted once, but in fact, this world may have restarted more than once." Her breathing suddenly became a little faster, as if she had an epiphany at this moment. "Yes, since the whole world can be restarted once, it seems that restarting the second and third time is not impossible. What about Shang Yanfei? Lan Shiwei suddenly said, is she someone who only appeared in this round, or? I don't know either. Musian shrugged, I don't know much about the master. He has only experienced the taste of the master's sister, but Musian is still a little confused about what that woman is thinking. But judging from the current performance, even if the sect master is not the one who restarted the world, he must have participated in it, or he must have been an observer who observed all of this. After all, judging from the current performance of the sect master's sister, she looks like a reborn person who has experienced reincarnation. Ancestor, are you in there? At this time, a cold and pleasant voice suddenly came from outside the small room, pulling the two back to reality from their contemplation. It's Lianer, why is she here? Lan Shiwei said to herself in surprise. Then, she quickly realized something, looked down at her slightly messy dress, and her cold and pretty face blushed slightly. You go out to see her first, I'll go out after I tidy up my clothes. Musian glanced at Lan Shiwei's snow-white skin exposed to the air, and couldn't help but smile secretly. Although he usually behaved very indifferently, when he was intimate, Lan Shiwei showed a great contrast. Senior, remember to tidy up your dress, senior sister is a very sensitive person, Musian reminded. Lan Shiwei glared charmingly, who do you think is to blame? Get out of here. Okay. Musian grinned, then bent down and walked out of the small room of the pleasure boat. Not long after, he saw the cold and noble Lan Mulian by the Taishu lake. Even in the dim light, the senior sister's face was still bright and beautiful. Compared to his ancestor, this senior sister has more girlish aura. The senior sister really looks similar to Lan Shiwei, but the temperament is a little different. Musian secretly admired and smiled. Senior sister, why are you here? Lan Mulian glanced at the boy and said lightly, I came to see the ancestor. After saying that, he paused again and continued, she didn't make things difficult for you, did she? It is obvious that Lan Mulian learned from someone what happened outside the ancestral land today, and that Musian was taken away by Lan Shiwei privately. She was worried, so she came to see her ancestor. Senior sister is really arrogant, caring about me in a roundabout way. Musian felt warm in his heart and smiled, I'm fine, don't worry, senior sister. Your ancestor just talked to me about something. Lan Murian nodded gently at first, then frowned and said, I'm not worried about you, I just asked by the way. Musian smiled but said nothing, seeing through but not saying it. Feeling a little uncomfortable being stared at by her junior brother, Lan Mulian changed the subject and asked, is the ancestor in the pleasure boat? As she spoke, her eyes passed over Musian and fell on the pleasure boat on the lake behind her. Lan Mulian was not surprised that Musian would appear here. The fact that Lan Shiwei appeared in the ancestral land not long ago had already alarmed the two sisters, so they all knew that the ancestor had come forward for them. They also knew that Musian was taken away by Lan Shiwei not long ago. As for where Lan Shiwei would go, it was not difficult to guess with just a little thought. As the ancestor of the Lan clan, the first thing he would do after being born was either to go to the Lan clan's ancestral hall or to Taishu Lake. Taishu Lake seemed to have some kind of important meaning to the ancestor. Previously, the two sisters acted separately. Lan Feiying went to the ancestral hall, and Lan Mulian came to Taishu Lake. The senior seems to have something to do. She should be out soon. If you have something to talk to her about, let's wait for her together. Musian crossed the pleasure boat and came to Lan Murian's side, smiling and asked, by the way, senior sister, is there anything important that you came to see your ancestors for? Not long ago, many elders of the Blue clan came to the ancestral land, and the noise outside woke Feiying and me up, Lan Murian said lightly. These elders have a deep influence in the Blue clan, and they are arrogant in their bones. However, not long after Musian and Lan Shiwei left, these elders came to Xianhuang Mountain to see the two sisters. Lan Murian was a little confused at first, until she heard the whole story. She knew that Lan Shiwei had scolded the younger generation of the Blue Clan not long ago. No wonder, I was still wondering why senior sister was so well informed. It turned out that she was awakened by the elders of the Lan clan. Musian reached out to touch senior sister's hand, but Lan Murian gently took a half step back, avoiding his intimate action. Is senior sister still angry? Musian showed a bitter look. You should know that many times I can't help myself. Het. Lan Murian immediately gave the boy a sneer. Do you want to say that it was Kingdi and the others who took the initiative to have sex with you, not you who took the initiative to be intimate with them? Although he said so, in fact, what junior brother said seemed to be fine. If those powerful people in the Hedeo realm wanted to do something, can junior brother stop them? In the final analysis, she was still too weak. Although Lan Murian was not afraid of anyone among the cultivators of the same realm, if she faced an old woman with an age advantage like Kingdi and Gong Lianyu, then there was nothing she could do. After all, she didn't know how much less time she had spent in cultivation than those old women. Lan Murian looked at her junior brother with her bright eyes, but she felt a little frustrated. As the recognized number one of her peers in Juzhu, she should have been at the age of glory, but facing those empresses who had already stood in Juzhu for thousands of years, she had no advantage at all. The secret of your natural furnace is now known to many ancient forces in Juzhu. I'm afraid that more and more people will come to you in the future. Lan Murian's beautiful eyes, as clear as a pool of water, seemed to dim a little, and she said softly, in the future, there will be more and more people around you. When I merge with the Tao in a few years, I'm afraid there will be no place for me around you. Sister, this is not like you at all. Musian showed a helpless smile. If I have to say it, it should be that I am worried that you will still be interested in me, a little cultivator, after you merge with the Tao in the future, and do you really think I will abandon you? You are the only disciple of the sect master. In fact, even now when I walk with you, I feel inferior. Your talent and appearance are so perfect. In fact, I am not worthy of you, sister. The sincere tone, coupled with the gentle eyes and handsome face, made Lan Murian's heart beat slightly faster. She suddenly realized something very important. If it weren't for going to Yuzhou to meet the Medicine King, Musian might still be hovering at the beginning of the return to Void Realm. So what junior brother said about him worrying about these things, seems to be possible. Or does senior sister regret it? Musian suddenly asked. He looked at the senior sister in white dress in front of him, who was as cold and flawless as the white moonlight, and whispered, do you regret being with me? Silence permeated the two of them, and the atmosphere seemed a little lonely. After a long time, a familiar cold voice broke the silence, I do regret it a little. But I don't regret being with you. Lan Murian looked at junior brother coldly, with a chill in her eyes, and her cold beautiful eyes seemed a little dark. I regret why I didn't tie you up in the basement of Lianji Peak after you entered the section. Musian. For some reason, seeing the serious look on senior sister's face, Musian inexplicably felt a slight chill on his back. For some reason, he always felt that the senior sister was not joking, but really thought so. Musian coughed lightly, trying to stay calm, and said jokingly, if we really do this, the elders of the sect should find out soon, right? No. Lan Murian tilted her head slightly and smiled, only my master and I live in Lianji Peak, and no disciples will pass by. Perhaps there will be people looking for you everywhere at first, but no one will think that I imprison you in Lianji Peak, and then in a month or two, this matter will be over. It's not like this kind of mysterious and strange things have never happened in the IE sect before. The disciple mysteriously disappeared within a few days of joining the sect. At first, the elders in the sect were still looking for someone, but in the end, nothing happened. Senior sister, can you please stop making such dangerous jokes as if nothing happened? Musian couldn't help but complain. Lan Mulian glanced at him with contempt in his smile. I'm not sure whether it's a joke or not. There was always a hint of threat in his tone. Seeing Musian's worried look, Lan Mulian couldn't help but curl the corner of his mouth slightly. In fact, she had never had such dangerous thoughts about Musian, but seeing Musian's subtle look now, Lan Mulian felt an indescribable sense of joy in her heart. Suddenly a bold idea came to me. If one day he really used that talisman to teleport his junior brother back to Lianji Peak, and then threw him into the basement, what would his expression be like? Just as he was imagining throwing someone into the basement and playing around with him, Lan Mulian suddenly felt a pair of affectionate eyes looking at him. His voice was gentle and low. Senior sister, so you don't regret being with me together, right? Why does this guy keep asking such things so well? Lan Mulian came back to his senses, feeling a little uncomfortable being stared at by the young man. His cold face was stained with a faint blush, and he silently looked away. After a long silence, he nodded lightly and said yes. Musian finally felt relieved. He put his hand on Lan Mulian's slender waist, and then without Lan Mulian even reacting, he lowered his head and kissed her red lips gently. The spiritual energy of the Tiansheng furnace was quietly circulating at this moment, and then continued to flow into Lan Mulian's body. The familiar breath and warm embrace were almost intoxicating, and made Lan Mulian's eyes slightly dazed. Just the gentle contact between lips makes one's heart beat. Musian's kiss was very skillful, making people's minds go blank and wanting to be completely immersed in it. The spiritual energy in his body had been poured into Lan Mulian's body at this moment, and the warm breath filled the nose, making Lan Mulian's heart gradually intoxicated. She knew that she could no longer leave her junior brother. Not only because of the natural furnace cauldron. She wants everything from her junior brother, and wants to get closer to him. Lan Mulian slowly closed her eyes and allowed Musian to press her against the big tree behind her to plead with her. At this moment, she suddenly felt a very familiar and reassuring aura. That was not the aura of the natural furnace, nor was it the aura of Musian. Lan Mulian opened her eyes in a daze, looking at the young man's handsome face so close at hand. She gently hooked her hands around his neck, and held her delicate body in his arms even more affectionately. At the same time, her beautiful eyes quietly changed from the original coldness to a majestic golden color. The holy body of destiny was completely activated at this moment. Even though Lan Mulian could not see through people whose realm was higher than his own, it was not difficult to see through Musian's origin. She wanted to see which woman had left this breath of comfort in her junior brother's body. Lan Mulian looked directly at Musian's body. Musian's origin was clearly visible at this moment, and the spiritual energy flowing in his body was completely reflected in his field of vision. As if he had seen something, Lan Mulian's body froze slightly, and his eyes were dull and stunned as he stared at the aura in Musian's body that seemed to exude a hint of chill. At the same time, a name came to mind, Ancestor. If Lan Mulian was full of tenderness and affection for Musian before, now her eyes have gradually become colder. At this time, Musian let go of Lan Mulian's soft lips, looked down at the beauty in his arms, and said softly, "Senior sister, do you still like the aura of the natural furnace?" "I like it," Lan Mulian said expressionlessly. Then, she continued to say quietly, "But there is something I don't know if I should remind you." Musian showed a gentle smile like sunshine. "What?" "The spiritual energy you just gave me contains the breath left by our ancestors." Musian's smile faltered. At this time, he saw Lan Mulian silently take out a golden talisman. For some reason, the moment he saw this talisman, Musian felt an indescribable sense of crisis. Senior sister seemed to have turned dark. Musian glanced around, using his eyes to send a distress signal to the woman in the darkness, "Sister Mengru, help, help, help." However, I could only vaguely hear a mocking sneer coming from the darkness. Musian forced himself to calm down and tried to stabilize his senior sister. "Senior sister, you should know that your ancestors' spiritual consciousness is weak, so. Lan Mulian glanced at the young man lightly and said softly, "Do you still remember what this talisman is?" Muzian said nothing. "This is the reward of the Immortal Ascension Conference, the teleportation talisman hand-refined by Master." Lan Mulian smiled sweetly, "It has only one function." The next moment, Lan Mulian burned the golden talisman in his hand. The black fog that originally permeated the Taishu lake seemed to be quietly moved by the wind, silently enveloping Muzian. The black fog was like a woman's hand, gently caressing his face. Then, the black fog quietly wrapped him in it. Then, a strong suction came, and Muzian disappeared very abruptly. When he came back to his senses again, what appeared in his vision was no longer the Taishu lake just now, but a very familiar boudoir. Muzian tried to move his body, but found that several black chains appeared at some point to restrain his hands and feet. "Oh, senior sister is serious." Muzian finally realized the seriousness of the problem. He originally wanted to let senior sister accept all this little by little, but he didn't expect that the heavenly destiny holy body was so tricky that even the breath of someone in his body could be seen clearly. At this moment, footsteps were faintly heard at the door. After a while, the door quietly opened. Muzian turned his head and said subconsciously, "Sister sect leader." Shang Yanfei looked at the tied-up boy with curiosity, and seemed to not understand what was going on. Then, after taking a few glances at the black chains on Muzian, she seemed to gradually understand everything, and smiled softly, "So, did Mulian use the teleportation talisman I made?" "It's a long story, anyway, can you ask the sect master sister to help me unlock the lock first? By the way, what kind of chain is this? I can't get rid of it at all." After Muzian finished speaking, he saw Shang Yanfei blinking her beautiful eyes and smiling, "This is a replica of the immortal gold lock. It's normal that you can't unlock it? But do you really want to unlock it now?" Muzian answered as a matter of course, after all, no one wants their freedom to be restricted. "It's just a temporary restriction." Shang Yanfei said lightly, "I said before that the first place in the Ascension Conference can get Muzian as a reward. So don't you consider my freedom," Muzian complained. Although this time he also made his senior sister angry and let the other party use the talisman. Shang Yanfei pondered for a moment, nodded thoughtfully, "That's true, I can't force another disciple to do something he doesn't like just to satisfy the wishes of one disciple. But if I don't do this, I'm afraid that the disciples of the sect won't take my words seriously in the future. They will think that I am a sect leader who can't keep my promises." She seemed to be really distressed, with a bit of thought in her tone. "Muzian, so you want to temporarily sacrifice my freedom to keep your promise? This doesn't seem to be in line with the style of a sect leader, right?" "You're right, it's really not good to force disciples of the sect to do something you hate. Unless the other party voluntarily sacrifices his freedom temporarily." Shang Yanfei walked to Lan Murian's bed and sat down slowly, with her beautiful legs crossed under her gorgeous dress. Then, she showed a charming smile that captivated people. She supported the edge of the bed with one hand, and placed her other cool jade hand on Muzian's thigh. With a slight curve at the corner of her mouth, she whispered in a charming voice, "How about as compensation for the temporary sacrifice of freedom, sister, can you satisfy you now? You can do whatever you want to me." Muzian's body stiffened. Even though he had suppressed the fire of Shang Yanfei before, there were still a lot of mysteries about this woman that had not been solved. And at this moment in this secret room, the woman's every frown and smile, and even the soft words lingering in her ears, were full of different temptations. This proposal, Muzian couldn't refuse. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 588. Musian was clearly worried about what his senior sister would do to him if she came back to Lianji section. Unexpectedly, after he was sent back to Lianji Peak by the teleportation talisman, the first person he saw was not his senior sister, but the sect master. In fact, if he was more rational, Musian should have rejected Shang Yanfei at this moment. After all, he did feel a little guilty about Lan Murian. Although he was trying to help her ancestors, he did do everything he should and shouldn't do to that beautiful ancestor. At this time, Shang Yanfei's slender jade hand had already reached out to Musian's chest, and her slender green jade fingers seemed to be careless, gently stroking along his chest. As if whispering, a charming voice came softly in my ear, "Are you feeling guilty? Do you feel that you are sorry for your senior sister?" Musian was silent for a moment, and hummed softly, "If you must say it, then so be it." Shang Yanfei smiled, "You didn't feel guilty when you were with other women before, but now you feel guilty about your senior sister." Her voice was a bit playful, and it seemed to linger in my ears, revealing an inexplicable charm. "Because I am her master, this identity makes you feel that we are sorry for Mu Lian by doing this." The gentle words were a bit teasing, which made Musian's heart tremble, and an inexplicable sense of excitement surged in his heart. Her delicate hand gently rested on Musian's thigh, as if she had noticed something. Soon, the corners of her mouth slightly raised, and she gazed at him gently, and opened her lips slightly. "Is that so? This kind of emotion of guilt and excitement intertwined, does it make you feel anything?" The state of the sect leader's sister is not right. Musian calmed down a little, secretly observed Shang Yanfei's expression, and soon found the clues. Now Shang Yanfei's eyes are more of a kind and gentle, and the desire hidden deep in her eyes. Musian suppressed his inner impulse and asked boldly, "Can I ask you a question first?" Shang Yanfei raised her eyebrows slightly, "Go ahead." "Mu Wange is also you, right?" Musian asked. Shang Yanfei lowered her eyes slightly and hummed softly, "Mu Wange is me, Mu Wanwan is also me." "Mu Wange, what kind of feelings does she have for me?" Musian asked. Each clone has different feelings for Musian, which Mu Wange had said before, but Musian still wanted to hear Shang Yanfei say it in person. "After she picked you up in the past, she has been raising you up. In her eyes, you are an obedient and sensible child." Shang Yanfei looked at Musian with a trace of pity and doting in her eyes. "She has always blamed herself for not being able to be by your side to watch you grow up, and also made you change from a good child to a bad child, so she wants to make up for you." Sure enough. Musian's heart was slightly enlightened. The personality and spiritual awareness of each sister of the sect master are completely different. Mu Wanji, who grew up with Musian, is more like an elder, very gentle and a little naive. But Mu Wanji is very shy, and will panic like a deer if she is teased a little. This is actually quite cute. Mu Wanwan, the ex-girlfriend who dated Musian in the past, is an annoying little goblin, with an unpredictable temperament and likes to play with people's hearts. He suspects that this is the same as the sect master. As for the elder sister of the clan leader, at first, he thought she was a steady and mysterious elder sister, but after getting to know her, he felt that she was a bit sultry. Yao Meng had also mentioned this before. Shang Yanfei is not a god without desires. She may have thought about many bad things in her heart, but she just thinks and will not do what she thinks. After all, she is a peerless empress on the surface, but in fact, the elder sister of the clan leader is a sultry. Of course, this sultry will also take action. When she was in Tianqian City, she took advantage of Musian's lack of growth to find him. So, is the elder sister of the clan leader a younger person? Musian suddenly thought. Just thinking about this, Musian suddenly noticed that Shang Yanfei looked at him with interest. As if she saw through what he was thinking at the moment. Musian suddenly froze for a moment, and suddenly wanted to sit up, but found that the replica of the fairy gold lock bound his hands and feet tightly. Musian calmed down a little and stared at Shang Yanfei's eyes. "Can you read minds?" "Yes," Mu Wange admitted before that she and Musian both have a personal interface, and Mu Wange has all the physical qualities of Musian. Shang Yanfei is of course also a chaotic body. What the queen of the demon realm can do, this woman can do too. The sect master's sister is too good. Marrying her is equivalent to marrying all the women in the world. After all, she can transform into any woman in the world. But, now is not the time to think about this. If this woman really can read minds, then when I first met her, she already knew what I thought of her in my heart. Musian was so ashamed that he wanted to cover his face silently, but now he could only be looked at by Shang Yanfei without reservation. "Why do you think I can read minds?" Shang Yanfei casually put her left leg on her right leg. Her black dress made her snow-white legs look particularly plump and slender. She wore a pair of dark gold flat sandals. Her instep was as smooth and white as jade, and her toes were painted with pink nail polish, which was attractive and sexy. Her whole body was only black and white, but the black dress seemed to make the blue veins on the woman's instep have a different kind of seductive beauty. As if she had noticed Musian's gaze, the peerless beauty looked down at him and said, "I don't know what you don't know. Is there a Taoist technique in your chaotic body that can read minds?" "But you..." Musian hesitated. "You want to say, but why can I always guess what you are thinking, right?" Shang Yanfei just raised her hand to touch Musian's face, and her light golden eyes were full of tenderness and pampering. "I just know you a little better than others. For example, I know what you are thinking now." Shang Yanfei gently touched his lips with her fingertips, her golden eyes were full of smiles, and she leaned over to his ear and whispered, "Do you want me to kneel down and serve you?" Dong dong. Musian's heartbeat accelerated in an instant. The woman's voice was like a veil caressing her face, gentle and with a tickling feeling. She whispered, "I can satisfy you." At this moment, Lan Mulian didn't know what happened in Lianji sect. As the teleportation talisman took effect, Musian's figure had already been sent to Lan Mulian's bedroom by the teleportation talisman, and was even very considerately bound by a fake fairy gold lock, waiting for her to go back and open champagne. Looking at the calm lake, Lan Mulian also turned around and planned to leave Taishu Lake. "Lian'er, why are you alone? Where is your junior brother?" At this time, Lan Shiwei, who had just changed into the crystal-colored dress, walked out of the painting boat, stepped barefoot on the lake, and saw Lan Mulian standing under the tree by the lake. When he saw that the expression of this descendant seemed a little bit wrong, Lan Shiwei asked in confusion, "What's wrong? You look so ugly. Did your junior brother make you unhappy?" The words of concern in the past sounded strangely harsh in Lan Mulian's ears at this moment. Lan Mulian quietly raised his head and looked at the beautiful face that seemed to be somewhat similar to his own, and whispered, "Ancestor, I know everything." Lan Shiwei was slightly startled, and seemed to have not reacted yet. Until he saw Lan Mulian's eyes, Lan Shiwei seemed to understand something, and the smile on his face became more complicated. "Did the child tell you everything?" "It wasn't him who said it, but I discovered it myself." Lan Mulian looked at the beauty standing not far in front of him and whispered, "Ancestor, have you forgotten what my physique is?" Although the heavenly destiny saint body could not see through Lan Shiwei's origin, it could see through Musian's origin. And in Musian's origin, there was the breath left by Lan Shiwei. Lan Shiwei was stunned for a moment, then seemed to react, and sighed, "I was thinking of telling you this slowly in the future, I didn't expect to find out so quickly." "Ancestor, why?" Lan Mulian hesitated. Although she had already seen the breath left by the ancestors from Musian's origin, she still couldn't believe it after seeing her admit it in person. In her heart, Lan Shiwei was the person she respected most besides her master. These days, Lan Shiwei almost handed over all the inheritance to the two sisters, and gave her warmth she had never felt before. That kind of warm care is like motherly love. However, such an admirable ancestor, and his junior brother. My spiritual consciousness is incomplete. Although my spiritual consciousness will not dissipate in the second arc, as long as I leave the second arc, this spiritual consciousness will probably disappear soon. Lan Shiwei looked at the descendant of the Lan clan in front of him faintly, and said in a gentle voice, "But after obtaining some of the spiritual energy of the natural furnace, my spiritual consciousness is much stronger than before. Now even if I leave the outside world, it can at least support 100 years without disappearing. In fact, I didn't intend to hide it from you at the beginning, but I discussed it with your junior brother, and we both hope that you can know this later. So that you can continue to practice dual cultivation without telling me during this period, to seek excitement." Lan Murian's voice was a little cold. "No." Lan Shiwei shook his head gently, "I know that both you and Fei Ying like that child, but there are already several powerful people around him. If you go to snatch him now, you will still lack too much. I know that if the dual cultivation between him and me is exposed, you may not listen to my teachings, so I hope to wait until I hand over all my inheritance and even the ancestral tools of the Lan clan to you before telling you about this." This was said very sincerely, and even at this moment, Lan Shiwei's eyes were also extremely sincere, and his tone was full of apology. "I'm afraid you will only think that these are excuses now, but I hope you will always remember that in this world, only I am your ancestor, and I will not do anything to harm the younger generation." "Why is the ancestor willing to help me so much?" Lan Murian asked subconsciously. She has actually gradually calmed down, and she also knows whether Lan Shiwei's words are lying or not. But she still can't understand. There are so many members of the Blue Tribe, so why did the ancestor choose these two as the true successors and even stand up for them? Obviously, the ancestors can already retreat behind the scenes and leave these trivial matters to the elders of the Blue clan to handle. Lan Shiwei's eyes were gentle. "Actually, you look a lot like me when I was young. Arrogant, powerful, and amazingly talented, but he only has no contact with outsiders and concentrates on practicing." From the moment she saw Lan Mulian, Lan Shiwei felt as if she was looking into a mirror. "If it were me, I would not get close to him without any emotional basis," Lan Mulian said coldly. "Lan Shiwei, is there any way to have a good conversation? If there is no emotional foundation, I will not get close to him, even if he is born with a natural heart," Lan Shiwei said softly. What this means is that the ancestor also had close contact and conversations with his junior brother. Lan Mulian was startled, "But weren't you always in the ancient ship in the past? Apart from that, when else had you had contact with him?" Lan Shiwei pointed to her forehead and said softly, "In a dream. From the moment I saw him, I felt a sense of déjà vu." Musian would be shocked if he heard this here. Isn't the so-called sense of déjà vu related to what Lan Shiwei said before about restarting the world? Maybe it sounds a bit fantasy to you, or even that I'm lying to you. But I did see him in my dream, more than once. We even became Taoist monks. Although those were very vague and fuzzy memories, and they were all fragments of memories that were only recalled after the aura of heaven poured into his body not long ago, Lan Shiwei still believed it. After all, according to the previous conversation with Musian, the world has restarted more than once. No one knows whether she has ever met Musian. Lan Shiwei paused for a moment and continued, "Actually, I did want to go for his natural furnace at first, but I just considered you two sisters, so I put away this idea. Later, you often talked about it during chats. Speaking of him, I was curious about what kind of man you two sisters could fall in love with at the same time, so I tried to get closer this time. Then I got myself involved too. You and Fei Ying lost their mothers when they were young. I have always regarded you two as my descendants and daughters." Lan Shiwei said softly, "I am just a fragment of spiritual consciousness. If it were not for the help of the spiritual energy of the Tian furnace, I would not even be able to leave the second arc. So this time I am also borrowing your junior brother's spiritual energy. To rectify the blue clan, on the other hand, we should also come out to relax. So don't worry, I won't compete with you for a man, he is yours. When Lan Mulian heard this, her beautiful eyes as clear as a cold pool couldn't help but tremble, and her expression suddenly became a little dazed. Daughter. She also thought that she could see her mother again. But this is no longer possible. But when she was with Lan Shiwei, she could often feel the concern of her elders. So when she learned that this respected elder was actually intimate with her junior brother, she found it difficult to accept it. But if you think about it carefully, junior brother's natural furnace can nourish the spiritual consciousness of the ancestors, and even help the ancestors condense their physical bodies in the future. Abandoning the ancestors in order to monopolize the younger brother, as a descendant of the ancestors, is this really filial? Although it was her ancestor who hid it from her, why did she think about it for her ancestor? The next moment, Lan Mulian raised her flawless beautiful eyes, which reflected Lan Shiwei's mature and sexy figure, and said seriously, Ancestor, it's okay for you to be intimate with him from now on. I know it's difficult for you to maintain your body with this spiritual consciousness, so if you don't mind. She took half a step closer, and her plump and graceful figure seemed to be close to Lan Shiwei's chest. After this, when you and your junior brother practice dual cultivation, I can lend you my body. Thank you for the reward from the deceased boss, I wish you good health. I'll add more as soon as I add some notebooks and pages to find some inspiration. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 589. For Lan Mulian, making this decision was undoubtedly a very bold decision. It can even be said to have a tendency to become green. After the powerful body was destroyed and only the spiritual consciousness remained, he could still rely on his own power to reverse everything and reunite with the physical body. But if even the spiritual consciousness is erased or only a trace is left, then there is no way. Before meeting Musian, Yao Meng, Lan Shiwei and other powerful people who only had a ray of spiritual consciousness did not actually have any hope of regaining their physical bodies. Of course, even if there is no natural furnace, it is not completely impossible. At least there is a way to save yourself. That is to find someone who is compatible with yourself, so that the spiritual consciousness can be lodged in the other person's furnace, and then find a way to repair a ray of spiritual consciousness. In the past, Yeqian and Yao Meng were people who were very compatible with each other. After all, one liked to be hummed, and the other liked to hum people. Lan Mulian and Lan Shiwei are also a couple who are very compatible with each other. Lan Shiwei was already very clear about this from the moment she met Lan Mulian. It's just that Lan Shiwei had no intention of using Lan Mulian at that time, and he had never intended to inhabit the descendants of the Lan clan with his spiritual consciousness. After all, she had an agreement with someone and would not leave the second arc easily. But now, she has fulfilled this agreement. Lan Shiwei waited until she found the promised person, Musian. Even if she wants to condense her physical body, she needs Musian's help. But Lan Shiwei didn't expect that her descendant would have been with Musian before that. She never expected that her descendant of the Blue Tribe would make such a bold proposal to share his body with her. No. I'm already sorry for you and Fei Ying. If I use your body to do evil again, I dash. Before Lan Shiwei finished speaking, Lan Mulian glanced at the ancestor who had already slept with his junior brother. Does the ancestor think what you did before was not inappropriate? Lan Shiwei. What is going on? Why, as the ancestor of the Blue Clan and the elder of this child, am I now being scolded by this child? Lan Shiwei didn't know how to communicate with his descendants for a while. Her dignity and dignity as an ancestor were gone the moment her relationship with Musian was revealed. She seduced the Taoist couple who was loved by future generations, and even had an intimate affair with him in secret, and even felt pleasure from it. I am afraid that in the eyes of Lianer at this moment, she is already a dissatisfied and despicable woman. However, even so, this descendant still thought about her in every way. After learning the truth, instead of blaming her, he was willing to share her body with him so that she could continue to practice dual cultivation with Musian in the future to warm and nourish her soul. Knowledge. With this, such considerate concern, who is whose elder? Even for a woman as cold as Lan Shiwei, her heart was filled with guilt at this moment. In Lan Shiwei's view, although she handed over her inheritance to sisters Lan Mulian and Lan Feiying, in fact, to her, this was just a trivial effort. But for Lan Mulian, her junior brother is probably one of the most important people to her. As a result, she now has to make so many sacrifices for her ancestors. If the future and Lianer temporarily use the same body, and she watches the elder she respects begging for mercy, or even praying for happiness in the arms of her beloved junior brother, how will Lianer feel? Are the ancestors planning to refuse? Lan Mulian suddenly asked. For a moment, Lan Shiwei's heart was extremely complicated. She looked at her descendants and didn't know how to respond. The bloodline of the Blue Clan has gradually become thinner since they lost you. Although what will happen to the Blue Clan has nothing to do with me, but don't the ancestors care? Lan Mulian glanced at the beautiful ancestor with a faint look, and said again, besides, that guy will probably be very excited if he knows about this. Excited? Lan Shiwei looked at Lan Mulian who was standing in front of him with slight confusion, and lightly opened her lips. You mean, your junior brother will be excited? Yes. Lan Mulian subconsciously grasped the hem of her skirt, which symbolized purity, and tilted her head, as if she was a little ashamed to say such words. But in the end, as if she had made up her mind, she raised her eyes and stared at the ancestor. Please use this body of mine, ancestor. I will also be with you. This matter will not be known to the people of the Blue Clan. If the people of the Blue Clan knew that the supreme ancestor in their hearts would take the initiative to act coquettishly in the arms of a junior, and that the other person was a married woman, I wonder what they would think. Lan Shiwei's beautiful eyes flickered slightly and she said softly, what do you mean? He was sent to Lianji Peak by my teleportation talisman, so he didn't know that the ancestor's spiritual consciousness was in my body, so we can give him a surprise when the time comes, Lan Mulian said softly. Lan Shiwei looked down at the pair of bright autumn eyes as clear as pool water. They were cold, beautiful, and unforgettable eyes at first sight. Eyes are the windows to the soul. As Lan Shiwei, who has met countless talented people in the past, she thinks that she has a very accurate eye for people. So she could tell now that Lan Mulian was not talking politely. Lianer, this kid, really wants to help her. At this moment, Lan Shiwei's eyes were filled with unprecedented tenderness. But the two of them didn't seem to notice that while they were talking, a woman was quietly looking at the side in a certain direction in the distance. The blue eyes revealed a bit of holy charm, and the corners of her mouth were slightly raised. No wonder I haven't seen him for so long, I thought he was really in the ancient ship. It turned out that he had been secretly transferred out by Lan Shiwei. Since the people have been packed and sent to the room waiting, then how can she refuse this great gift from Lan Shiwei and Lan Murian? It was late at night. Shang Yanfei got up and opened the window, and the biting cold wind quietly poured into the room. The night wind blew her hair, blowing the woman's skirt and robe with it, and coupled with that peerless back, it gave people a bit of the charm of the empress overlooking the world. But if you look at her from the front, you will find that this mysterious and intellectual sister of the clan leader, at this moment, the elegant and beautiful face still has a bit of blush that has not faded. The dress was a little loose, and it was just draped over the body. When the wind blew, The dress slid down along the round shoulders a little, as if it was full of infinite beautiful reverie. I don't know when it started. Shang Yanfei opened her beautiful eyes and glanced at the bed behind her. Musian was looking at her quietly, as if thinking about something. "Do you have anything to say?" Shang Yanfei asked. "I always feel that the roles between us are reversed. It stands to reason that after the double cultivation, the girl should shyly hide in the quilt, and the boy should sit in front of the window sill to enjoy the hazy night, but now you are lying on the bed, right?" Shang Yanfei raised her eyebrows slightly and said, "But isn't this the setting of this world?" Musian was stunned for a moment. "Have you forgotten your position?" There was a slightly playful smile in her eyes. Musian's eyes widened suddenly. "You even know this?" The heroine of Destiny refers to Musian, while Bai Ruoxi, Wei Mengru, Ye Lingxian and others are the protagonists of this world. Logically speaking, this is already Musian's biggest secret. "Who are you?" Musian couldn't help asking. "We have met before, right?" Shang Yanfei sat in front of the window sill, swinging on her toes, looking at him with a smile. "Of course, I was also your Taoist partner in your previous life." "Is it the previous life, or the previous life before that?" Musian asked. "Or, a long, long time ago." Shang Yanfei was silent for a moment. After a while, she pursed her sexy red lips and said lightly, "I forgot." At this moment, Musian immediately knew that the other party was going to perfunctorily pass it over. He thought for a while and said again, "You came to Tianqian City to find me when I was a child, right?" This time, Shang Yanfei's expression finally changed a little, and there was a little more doubt in her eyes when she looked at Musian. "How do you know?" "Musian, I may subconsciously forget the encounter with you because I blocked the secrets of heaven, but it does not mean that there is no such thing in my memory, but these memories are blocked. But I saw the blocked memory fragments in some way before. It seems that the sect leader does not know everything, but it's better this way. If she knows everything I did when and where, it would be too scary. If she becomes sickly one day, I will be caught instantly wherever I escape." Seeing Shang Yanfei showing this rare panic look, Musian was relieved. If Shang Yanfei was like an omniscient god in his mind before, then Shang Yanfei is more human now. At least you can see her emotions. "By the way, does the sect master like me more when I was a child?" Musian showed an improper smile. In the past, he was always passive when facing the mysterious and intellectual elder sister. Although she seemed a little panicked when he suppressed the karma fire for her last time, now think about it, it was more like she was deliberately backfired by the karma fire, so as to find a reason to accept the nourishment of the natural furnace. And now facing the sect master who seemed a little embarrassed and shy, Musian decided to be a strong disciple. "The nine-tailed sky fox can change my appearance to your favorite time period, but the premise is that you need to unlock the fairy gold lock," Musian said in a persuasive way. "If nothing unexpected happens, the senior sister should be on the way back now. It is still unknown what the senior sister will do to him in the blackened state. If he could move freely, Musian would not be very afraid, but now this fake fairy gold lock controls his actions. Once the senior sister returns to Lianji Peak, he has no room to operate and can only be slaughtered. Occasionally, there are little sisters in the spirit dragon in Lianji Peak who come to look for food. If they smell Musian's scent, they will run to him happily, but now she is still attacking the barrier of Yahua realm. It means that if the senior sister turns black now, no one can save Musian. He can only save himself. But the premise of saving himself is to unlock this fairy gold lock." "You want me to unlock the fairy gold lock?" Shang Yanfei leaned against the windowsill and glanced at him with a slight smile. "I just said that the talisman is a reward for the Ascension Conference. Since Mu Lian used it, I can only watch and cannot interfere in your affairs." "Then what you just said to me, doesn't that count as interference?" Concubine Shang Yan said calmly, "It is not interference if it is not noticed." Muzian. Is this a fallacy? After pondering for a moment, Muzian made a bold decision. Sister, the sect leader doesn't want senior sister to know what happened between us, right? Concubine Shangyan smiled brightly. Do you think she will believe you if you tell her? She can see through the origin, so she can see the breath you left in my body at a glance. Concubine Shangyan said calmly, she can't see it. Muzian was startled. Impossible, as long as someone is close to me, their breath will definitely stay in my body. When he said this, he scanned his body with his spiritual consciousness, and then he couldn't help but look up in surprise again at the woman who was looking at him with a smile. After being hummed by the sect master, Muzian didn't even have any aura related to her left in his body. Is this also because Tianji is blocked? Muzian asked subconsciously. After being intimate with concubine Shangyan, there was no trace of her breath left in his body. Concubine Shangyan smiled and said nothing, but casually glanced in a certain direction outside the window sill. A ray of cyan light can be vaguely seen there. Your senior sister should be returning to the IE sect soon, but I think she won't do anything too outrageous to you, just be patient for a little bit. After gently ruffling the young man's hair again, Muzian watched as the sect leader turned around and left the bedroom with satisfaction after finishing the work. Muzian opened his mouth and wanted to reach out to hold concubine Shangyan, but he could only watch the figure of the sect master gradually disappear from the field of vision. The door then closed quietly. Muzian was lying on his senior sister's bed, looking at the beams on the ceiling, and fell into brief contemplation. The reaction came quickly afterwards. Ikeo, does this mean that I was given a free prostitute by the sect leader's sister? After she was satisfied, she threw him on the senior sister's bed. After the master enjoyed it, he planned to let his disciple enjoy it. What kind of bus am I? Muzian couldn't help but sigh. If I had known this, I would have given her more education with sticks just now. It has to be said that concubine Shangyan is probably the most elusive fish in his fish pond. Others have more or less clues to follow, but the sect master cannot figure out her thoughts at all. For example, just now, if the sect master really didn't want his senior sister to know what was going on between them, why would she take the risk and come to her senior sister's room to see him? It can only be said that today's fish ponds are no longer a small matter, and the boat may capsize if you are not careful. Just like this time, the senior sister became so angry that she directly used the teleportation talisman to throw him into her bedroom. This time it was senior sister. I don't know who it will be next time, Muzian sighed quietly. Now you should know who is really good to you, right? Suddenly, a sweet voice as crisp as a silver bell came from beside him. Unexpectedly, the woman was sitting behind Muzian, stroking his face tenderly. What was resting on the back of Muzian's head was no longer a pillow, but thighs as white as gelatin. Muzian was stunned for a moment and subconsciously raised his head to look. Then, he almost blurted out, Yao Meng. Why are you here? Shouldn't you? What should I do? Should I just wait outside the ancestral land for you to come out? Yao Meng said with a smile, I really thought you were staying in the ancient ship. Until not long ago I saw your senior sister leaving the ancestral land and rushing towards a certain direction of the Blue Clan, so I followed her and took a look. The result was a pretty interesting picture. Thinking about it, Lan Shiwei had already taken action against him during the few days he stayed at the ancient ship. So when I met Lan Shiwei not long ago, her aura of spiritual consciousness was much stronger than at the beginning. Yao Meng leisurely played with the young man's forehead with his fingertips. I really didn't expect that the teleportation talisman made by concubine Shangyan could actually send a person to Lianji Peak at a fixed point without anyone noticing. If she hadn't cheated on a lot of people and realized it, she probably wouldn't have reacted yet. I originally thought that if I arrived at Lianji Peak one step ahead of Lan Shiwei, I could taste the head soup. Unexpectedly, there was already someone in the Lianji sect waiting for him. Yao Meng sighed softly and gave Muzian a meaningful look. You are really being targeted by someone quite troublesome. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 590. For Musian, Shang Yanfei is a somewhat conservative, mysterious, and intellectual elder sister. Yao Meng is a fairy who is both pure and lustful. She appears cold and indifferent on the surface, but can have fun with you in private. But they both have one thing in common. When they are close to them, both the leader and Yao Meng will show a slightly reserved and shy attitude. But when they are reserved, they know how to stimulate Musian's XP. The charm revealed by this pure and cold attitude. It can only be said that it is too hot. However, what Musian cares about now is not whether it is hot or not, but, Sister Kingdi, don't you plan to help me unlock this fairy gold lock first? Musian looked at Yao Meng's beautiful back and couldn't help asking. Yao Meng tilted her head to look at the young man, with a little smile in her eyes. Now you know who loves you the most, right? I will never use this kind of chain to restrict your actions. This is more like expressing the feeling of your sect leader's sister, including your senior sister, are calculating you, only I will not do this to you. You have indeed never used a chain, but you can use the pure world vine. Musian's eyes were a little touched. I know that the Green Emperor's sister loves me the most. Then, he silently glanced at the green seed in Yao Meng's hand. His eyes were quite fearful, and said, but what are you going to do with the pure world seed in your hand? Yao Meng glanced at him and smiled lightly. Don't you think you have been too intimate with other women recently? She played with the pure world seed in her hand, and there was a faint fairy mist around her. The green vine silently wrapped around Yao Meng's flawless white legs without friction, swept over her arms, and stayed at her fingertips. Yao Meng smiled and said, so I was thinking, should I take you back to Yaokai Holy Land to practice meditation for a while? Can you really practice meditation in Yaokai Holy Land? Isn't it a night of revelry? Musian's eyelids twitched slightly, and he said, can you unlock my immortal gold lock first? I can't do it. Yao Meng smiled and said, this is a Taoist magic set by concubine Shang Yan. Although it is not the real immortal gold lock, it is also a replica of it. If you want to forcibly erase the replica of the immortal gold lock, you can, but I'm afraid that this will hurt you by mistake. Musian pondered for a moment, and suddenly hesitated, saying, by the way, the ancestral weapon is made of the immortal gold lock, right? Since the sect master can make a replica of the immortal gold lock, can he also copy other people's ancestral weapons? Yao Meng nodded slightly. If I'm not mistaken, it should be feasible. Concubine Shang Yan's physique should be able to copy everything in the world. But it shouldn't be so easy to analyze the origin of all things, not to mention that she copied the immortal gold lock. It's really strange. Musian didn't think it was strange. The master can copy everything in the world, even his personal interface. It's not surprising that he can copy the immortal gold lock. If you want to copy something, you need to analyze the origin first. And analyzing the origin usually takes several years. But there are exceptions to everything. For example, if you have a physique that can see through the origin of all things, then the problem is solved. Musian himself is a pseudo-physique of the heavenly destiny saint body. The master has the same personal interface as Musian, and the physique he has, the master will also have. When thinking of this, Musian couldn't help but sigh secretly. Who is the protagonist here? See through the origin of all things and analyze it, and then copy the same thing. Shang Yanfei can copy the ancestral artifact, the technique, and even the system. Although the effect is definitely not as good as the original body, this technique itself is already exaggerated. Speaking of which, can I see through the origin of this immortal gold lock? Musian suddenly had a thought, and after thinking of this possibility, he slowly closed his eyes. Then, his spiritual consciousness swept over the replica of the immortal gold lock that bound his hands. Buzz. After seeing through the origin of the immortal gold lock, a soft white light gradually emerged in front of his eyes. In that white light, a woman seemed to be vaguely seen. She sat under the pavilion, slowly drawing a talisman with Taoist magic. Behind her, it seemed that the sound of 9 black chains intertwining and colliding with each other could be vaguely heard, solemn and sacred, like the roar of the avenue. After a while, a replica of the immortal gold lock quietly appeared in her palm, and finally quietly disappeared in the teleportation talisman. This is the process of Shang Yanfei making the teleportation talisman. Although he can't copy everything in the world like Shang Yanfei now, Muzian can see through its origin and see the process of Shang Yanfei copying the immortal gold lock. At the same time, a soft white light quietly floated out from Muzian's body, and it was like water, soaking the surface of the immortal gold lock. Heavenly Qi. Muzian possessed 3 heavenly Qis, and later with the help of Yuan Luo, the 3 heavenly Qis were mixed together, and he could freely imitate any weapon. But the prerequisite is that he must be able to see through the origin of the target weapon. It seems that it is really possible. Muzian soon discovered with surprise that after the heavenly Qi covered the immortal gold lock, it began to reverse and disintegrate the immortal gold lock's restraint on him. Click. Vaguely, I seemed to hear the sound of chains clashing in the house. Immediately afterwards, the immortal gold lock fell off from Muzian's wrist. Oh! Sensing the movement on Muzian's side, Yao Meng looked at the young man with a strange light in his eyes, and said softly, "You actually untied it yourself. It's just a little attempt. You have to find a way to save yourself." Muzian shrugged, looking at the heavenly energy surrounding him that had turned into chains at the moment. "I finally have a lock that works." Muzian was filled with emotion. When I saw that Sister Mengru, Lingxian, and Naxi all had locks, to be honest, Muzian felt a little envious. After all, every time they turned black, they could directly lock him. But now, the Qi of heaven has simply disintegrated and swallowed up the immortal gold lock, and even turned into the appearance of the immortal gold lock. You know, these are 4 fairy gold locks. Even if they are replicas, they cannot be underestimated. After taking the heavenly Dao Qi back into his body, Muzian suddenly felt a green vine quietly wrapping around his feet. He immediately reacted and looked up quickly. "Wait a minute, what do you want to do?" Yao Meng crossed his arms, with a mysterious and profound light flowing in his beautiful eyes, and said softly, "Didn't I just say that? I will take you back to practice meditation. Don't you want to?" The sound was pleasant to the ear, as if it directly struck the soul, making people's minds go into a trance. Muzian swallowed subconsciously and his pupils shrank slightly. After a while, he came back to his senses and said with a somewhat helpless tone, "The charm of Yaokai is not for you to use to charm others." Obviously, Yao Meng's fairy voice mixed with the Taoist rhyme of Yaokai Holy Land can affect a person's mind. This will naturally have an impact on Muzian, but now that he has the body of a 9-tailed celestial fox, he is already immune to most charm techniques. It seems that your cultivation level has improved a lot. Yao Meng lazily raised his hands and stretched his waist, his graceful and convex body curves vividly displayed under the candle light. She glanced at Muzian indifferently and said with a smile, "I think if the Queen of the Demon Realm charms you now, you should be able to resist it. I just don't know if I can resist the charm technique, but if I can resist the temptation of the Queen of the Demon Realm herself." At the end of the sentence, she looked at Muzian with a more meaningful look. Even if he was immune to charm, it didn't mean that Muzian would not have any urge to kiss her when faced with the sexy and voluptuous figure of the Queen of the Demon Realm. Muzian coughed lightly, "Don't talk about it now, I have something to ask you for help." Yao Meng raised her eyebrows slightly and said softly, "Please beg me." "Please," Muzian said. "Yao Meng." Seeing the young man's straightforward request, Yao Meng couldn't help curling his lips and said calmly, "There is no sincerity at all." Muzian was startled. "Then what should I do?" "How about licking your feet to please you?" Then who wins and who loses? Yao Meng rolled her eyes at him charmingly, with a hint of charm in her blue eyes. You tell me first, as long as it's something I can do, I won't refuse you. The Holy Land of Yaokai has been in Dongzhou for such a long time, so it must have left many ancient books recording Dongzhou, right? Muzian asked a seemingly insignificant question. Yao Meng nodded lightly. Of these ancient forces in Dongzhou, the one with the most detailed ancient records is the Daqian dynasty, followed by the Yaokai Holy Land and the Lianji sect. Although the restricted area is powerful, because it is a closed place, it does not contain many ancient books recording Dongzhou. The reason why the Daqian dynasty has the most records is not only collected by a single Daqian dynasty, but because the Daqian dynasty covers the ancient records of almost all dynasties established in Dongzhou in the past. Of course, some of these records are incomplete. What do you want me to check? Yao Meng asked. Do you still remember that when I was in the restricted area, I asked you about the body of doom? Muzian suddenly asked. After every dynasty falls, a body of doom will appear. The existence of the body of doom is like marking the end of the dynasty, right? Yao Meng's beautiful eyes flickered and hesitantly said, why are you checking this out? I want to confirm whether the body of doom refers to the same person, or whether the body of doom that appears every time the dynasty falls is a different person, Muzian said. Yao Meng finally understood what Muzian meant, narrowed his eyes, and said softly, do you suspect that all the bodies of doom are actually the same person? I don't know, that's why I wanted to make sure. Muzian said, the way of heaven is exploiting loopholes in the rules of heaven and earth, because even the way of heaven itself must abide by the rules of heaven and earth. It can only truly manifest when it imposes heaven's punishment on the body of doom. So if possible, I would like to know who the doomed beings who witnessed the downfall of the dynasty were in the past. There will be more or less records in these ancient books. Besides, he raised his head and stared into Yao Meng's eyes. The Daqian dynasty has been standing for nearly 1,000 years, right? Maybe this time we can see how the heavens sent down the punishment and allowed the body of doom to be born. Do you think the Daqian dynasty is coming to an end? Yao Meng's fingertips carelessly twirled a strand of hair, and whispered, actually, I have the same feeling. Before Gu Boxing died, he had done a lot of things that damaged the national destiny of the Dagon dynasty. I'm afraid that the human dynasty is now in turmoil. The old emperor's fate is coming to an end. The current prince has been neglected for too long and has never participated in politics. It is too difficult to catch up on the governance of the court now. During this period, some disciples in Yaokai have been talking about the recent internal turmoil in the Dagon dynasty. Yao Meng nodded gently and said, I know. I will go to the Yaokai Holy Land later and let several disciples accompany me to look through the ancient books recording the Dongzhou dynasty. After all, this is your request. Muzian heard this, his eyes were a little more guilty, and he looked at the fairy in a green skirt floating in the air in front of him. He opened his mouth slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but he finally held back. However, Yao Meng seemed to have noticed something and looked at him slightly. Are you feeling guilty? Because you have been close to many beauties during this period, do you feel guilty now that you see me? Yao Meng counted on his fingers and said slowly, if you count carefully, there should be 4 or 5 people who have enjoyed the Tiansheng furnace during this period, right? Muzian. But it doesn't matter, don't forget who sent you to Yuzhou in the first place. Unlike what Muzian imagined, Yao Meng did not get angry at all, but changed her usual cold attitude. She was like a gentle elder sister, suddenly reaching out to hug the boy into her arms and gave him a warm embrace. Muzian's face was buried in the arms of Sister Kingdi, the faint fragrance quietly drifted into his nose, and a gentle and pleasant voice floated to his ears, Muzian, your natural furnace is destined that you will not be alone by my side in the future, so I never planned to monopolize you from the beginning. Yao Meng had figured this out as early as when she took Muzian to Yuzhou. Muzian is a natural furnace, and is destined to attract all kinds of vixens. If you have to say it, Yao Meng herself is actually one of the vixens. You can't block it just by blocking. No matter how devoted Musian is, facing the temptation of a stunning beauty, can you refuse it once? Can you refuse it a second time, a third time? It is said in the way to control your husband that when a man's heart cannot be tied to you, you can try to take the initiative to guide him. When he understands your difficulties, he will feel extremely sorry and guilty. And these emotions will eventually turn into love. After all, I like you the most, she said again in a gentle tone. The delicate fragrance, the softness of the body, and the tenderness like caring for a child blended into a unique charm. Even the experienced driver who had been through many flowers could not stand this tenderness. Musian's heart trembled, as if a warm current flowed through his body. Yao Meng's confession was too sudden, and he was a little confused for a while. The atmosphere in the room was extremely ambiguous. Musian opened his mouth slightly and was about to speak. However, in the meantime, Yao Meng had already raised her index finger to his lips. Hush! Yao Meng licked her red lips, her beautiful eyes were moist and charming, and she breathed into his ears, rather than thanking you, it would be more practical to love me a little more, right? On this bed of your senior sister. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us, we will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 591. At this time, Lan Mulian was still on the way back to the sect. After Lan Shiwei temporarily placed his spiritual consciousness in Lan Mulian's body, if he wanted, Lan Mulian could use the power of his ancestors to easily tear open the space crack and reach the outside of Lianji sect. In fact, Lan Mulian did so. However, it would take at least a quarter of an hour to fly from the outskirts of Lianji sect to Lianji Peak. Lan Mulian had figured it out. Although she was extremely talented, she still had too much time to practice compared to Qingdi and others. And the ancestors were also interested in Musian. Letting the ancestors' spiritual consciousness reside in her body, on the one hand, can be filial to her ancestors, on the other hand, even in the future, even if she faces other big sharks in the fish pond of her junior brother, she will have the strength to fight. This is a win-win method. When Lan Mulian was turning into a white light and flying towards Lianji Peak, at this moment in a bedroom in Lianji Peak, Yao Meng was nestling in Musian's arms, like a well-behaved and obedient little girl. Her hair was a little messy, her red lips slightly parted, and her mouth exhaled a moist breath. The human emperor of Yahua realm is the highest combat power in Zhuzhu at present, and only the ancient creatures in the Forbidden Land can fight with the power of rules. However, when such a powerful human emperor faced this little cultivator of enlightenment realm, he could only obey and let him suppress him. Your mental power and physical body are indeed much stronger than mine. In the bedroom, Musian felt the soft body in his arms, gently hugged her slender waist, lowered his head and buried his face in her arms, sighing from the bottom of his heart. Then, he continued, I'll trouble you from now on. Yeah. After responding lazily, she looked down at the boy buried in his arms and said with a smile, what's the use of me being strong, am I still no match for you? This kind of soft whisper in the ear is enough to give a man great satisfaction. If this place is not inappropriate, Musian almost couldn't help but suppress her again now. But fortunately, reason finally overcame impulse. After all, no matter what, senior sister should be on her way back now. If she was caught by her, it's hard to imagine what will happen. Watching Yao Meng turn into a green light and quietly leave the hall, Musian took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Previously, Musian had been worried about what to do if senior sister came back halfway, so he was always in a state of tension and excitement. But now he can rest assured. Although the sister's divine body can see through a person's origin, and even Musian can see clearly whose spiritual energy is in his body, but those powerful people can erase the breath they left behind if they want. Just thinking about this, at this moment, Musian suddenly felt a very familiar breath coming from a distance to the hall. The sister's breath. Musian's mind moved slightly, and he quickly lay back on the bed, and then summoned the heavenly energy. The heavenly energy that disintegrated and devoured the fairy gold lock quietly wrapped around his hands and feet again, just like the sealed Musian. He was a little curious about what the sister would do to him when he was tied up. Wait until the sister is ready to do something, then unlock the fairy gold lock and give her a big surprise, Musian thought to himself. Familiar footsteps seemed to be heard in the distance. That was the sound of white boots stepping on the floor. The sister is back. Musian quietly closed his eyes, only to hear footsteps approaching. After a while, the door opened, Lan Mulian walked into the room, and saw the boy lying on the bed. Are you awake? Lan Mulian did not approach directly as Musian imagined, but asked after looking at his junior brother. Musian had to open his eyes and saw his senior sister in a moon-white dress. Her long hair was scattered down, highlighting the cold appearance of the beauty. She was wearing a pair of snow-white jade boots, and a hint of white calves was faintly revealed between the hem of her skirt and her calves. The heavenly fate holy body is really tricky, he saw through his pretending to sleep. If the senior sister wanted, she should be able to catch the adultery anytime and anywhere, right? Even though Musian had already known the trickiness of the senior sister's physique, he still couldn't help but sigh secretly at this moment. Sister, where did this fairy gold lock come from? Musian decided to play a trick with her sister, and asked in a puzzled manner. The replica that master copied before, there are 4 fairy gold locks in total. She stored them together in the teleportation talisman. As long as it is used on the target, the fairy gold lock will control the opponent's actions. Don't you have anything else to say? As she said this, Lan Murian slightly raised her arrogant chin, her voice was cold, and her pretty face was like frost. In fact, she is not angry now, after all, she understands the ancestors' approach. But it is impossible to pretend to be indifferent in front of the junior brother, at least he has to be punished a little bit. Musian thought about it, and said with a forced smile, when does the senior sister plan to unlock this fairy gold lock? Let's talk about it when I'm in a good mood. Lan Murian walked into the bedroom, walked along the bed, looked at the young man on the bed with interest, and said, can the imitation fairy gold lock restrict the spiritual energy of the Enlightenment realm cultivator? No wonder the master said this thing is very tricky before. Musian's mind moved slightly, and asked, even the sect master thinks the fairy gold lock is very tricky. He knew that Shang Yanfei used the fairy gold lock to restrain herself, but he didn't expect that even the sect master had said that the fairy gold lock was tricky. Then again, the sect master was bound by 9 fairy gold chains. Is this self-restraint, or is it restricted by something? Each fairy gold lock is equivalent to an ancestral artifact, and 9 fairy gold locks are restrained on a person. Do you think it will not be tricky? The beautiful senior sister walked to the bed and sat down, looking at him coldly, with teasing and anger in her eyes as clear as a pool of water. Compared to this, I just want to know how you think of me in your heart. Musian was stunned. Senior sister is naturally the one I respect the most. Lan Murian sneered, the respect you are talking about is the respect of practicing dual cultivation with your own senior sister. It seemed a little difficult to say. When she said the last sentence, her voice suddenly became as thin as a mosquito's hum, and a faint blush appeared on her icy face. Lan Murian has always been the type who likes intimacy but is not very proactive. She can say something like dual cultivation, which is enough to imagine how dissatisfied she is at the moment. I have to say, Senior sister looks so cute, Musian couldn't help but smile secretly, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. At this time, Lan Murian frowned and stared at Musian. Were you laughing at me just now? Musian shook his head quickly. No. Lan Murian raised her eyebrows slightly, looked at him for a few times, and quickly chuckled. Forget it, there is no need for me to care so much with you. After all, now that her junior brother is in her hands, isn't it easy for her to do anything? Master, senior sister, what do you want to do? Musian suddenly realized that something was wrong and subconsciously wanted to move back, but was tightly bound by the fairy gold lock and could not move. Lan Murian glanced at him, and a rare smile like breaking the ice appeared on her face. Why are you so flustered? Do you think I will hurt you? At the end, she took out a veil from the ring and covered his eyes after folding it. Ancestor, are you ready? I will exchange your and my spiritual consciousness later. Lan Murian said softly in her heart, and her tone seemed to be a little more nervous. Even she did such an absurd thing for the first time, and actually sent her junior brother, her Taoist partner, to the arms of the ancestors. If the junior brother knew, he would probably blame her for not discussing it with him beforehand. Lan Murian was thinking about this, and suddenly felt her thoughts interrupted, because she felt a cold fairy gold lock quietly wrapped around her jade neck. At the same time, two fairy gold locks also silently bound her legs and restricted her movements. Lan Murian raised her head suddenly and saw that the fairy gold locks that had just restricted the junior brother's movements had been unlocked, and even all of them had become shackles that restricted her at this moment. You actually unlocked the talisman left by the master by yourself. Lan Murian's tone was full of surprise and astonishment. Senior sister is a divine body, so I also know a little about the art of peeping through the origin. I just tried it a little bit, and I didn't expect it to be so smooth. Musian smiled, looking at the cold beauty in front of him who was bound by the fairy gold lock, and her beautiful eyes staring at him in disbelief, paused, and continued, Senior sister, I am also trying to protect myself, don't blame me. I thought Lan Murian would show emotions such as fear and surprise, but to Musian's surprise, Lan Murian's eyes were as calm as always, looking at him with a smile, and said, the imitation fairy gold lock, even if it is the enlightenment realm, it is impossible to break it by force, but you have peeped through the origin of the fairy gold lock, and with the help of the heavenly energy, you have unlocked the fairy gold lock. Then, what are you going to do to me now? The tone is still cold, but with Lan Murian's attitude at the moment, it makes people's heartbeats faster. I saw a beautiful woman with long hair hanging down in a white dress, half lying on the soft couch behind her, leaning. The white dress was a little messy because of the previous entanglement of the fairy gold lock. Under the hem of the skirt, you can vaguely see the snow-white, slender, plump, and beautiful legs and the fairy gold lock on the ankle. Her creamy red lips were slightly pursed, and there was a hint of anger and shame in her cold expression. There was a trace of mist in her beautiful eyes when she looked at Musian. Senior sister, you should know that Ancestor Lan could not leave the second arc because of his weak spiritual consciousness. Musian paused slightly and continued, so I was with her before. I also hoped that the senior could leave the gloomy ancient ship as soon as possible. Lan Murian smiled lightly and said, is there any necessary connection between what you said and what you are going to do now? I haven't done anything yet. Your eyes have betrayed you. Lan Murian said lightly, because you saw me being bound by the fairy gold lock, you have bad intentions, right? She glanced at the candlelight not far away and said with a smile, do you want to punish me, your senior sister, who trapped you in the bedroom without permission, with some small props, as written in Ufuyudeo? But master still has 9 fairy gold chains on her body, why don't you have any bad thoughts about her? If it was normal, Musian should have realized that Lan Murian was a little bit wrong at this moment. Because she was too calm. However, at this moment, Musian's attention was attracted by the small props that Lan Murian just mentioned, and fell on the swaying candle light. Afterwards, when he noticed Lan Murian's slightly playful eyes, he couldn't help but cough lightly. "Senior sister, no matter what, I can't do this to you. As for using those small props to Shang Yanfei, as senior sister said, it is even more unrealistic. Even though the sect master's sister was sealed by 9 fairy gold chains, she still has the strength of the Hedeo realm. If anyone really wants to do something bad to her, no one can do it unless she is willing. So do you want to unlock the fairy gold lock for me now?" For some reason, her tone seemed to be full of inexplicable temptation. "It is impossible to unlock it directly, after all, we haven't started playing some small games yet." Musian calmed down and said with a smile, "I will do what senior sister planned to do to me just now." At the end, he was about to fold the veil and cover Lan Murian's eyes. However, at this time, Musian felt that his body seemed to stiffen slightly, and then, it seemed that the feet were covered by the hard-to-melt extreme ice quietly. "What's going on? Can you repeat what you said just now?" Almost without giving Musian any time to react, the fairy gold lock that originally bound Lan Murian had shortened section by section. It seemed to have its own will, and it was frozen by the extreme ice and dared not continue to bind this woman. Lan Murian suddenly opened her extremely gorgeous ice blue eyes, and her pupils seemed to be printed with snowflakes. Musian was stunned for a moment, as if he realized something, and blurted out subconsciously, "Is Lan Shiwei in your furnace?" Lan Murian smiled sweetly, and then said in a cold tone, "I have already agreed with the ancestors that I will help her reunite with her body as soon as possible." Musian's heart skipped a beat, and he said, "Senior sister, wait." Before he finished speaking, the whole room froze in an instant. "I'm so stupid. Really? I only knew that my senior sister had just comprehended the Tao rhyme, so it was impossible for her to break free from the shackles of the fairy gold lock. But I didn't expect that my senior sister would be so filial that she even let Lan Shiwei's spiritual consciousness reside in her body." One day later, Musian dragged his tired body back to Tianhe Garden. After using the medicinal food that Shang Yanfei had sent not long ago, Musian held his waist and returned to the room, half closed his eyes, and entered a short meditation. After this wave, his natural furnace was completely exhausted. Sister Sect Master is so considerate. She knows I'm weak, and she specially sent me a meal of medicinal food to replenish my energy. I just don't know if this counts as a work-related injury. Recalling what happened in Lianji Peak yesterday, Musian was a little emotional for a while. At this time, Musian heard the door creak open, and he almost subconsciously pressed his waist. And then, after seeing that the person in front of him was Miss Tiandeo, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. "You scared me. Don't you usually only come to Zhu when something major happens? Why did you come to Lianji Sect to find me so soon? Does the master not want me here?" Miss Tiandeo tilted her head slightly and asked in confusion. "Is it because you have been intimate with other women and entered a state of no desire, so you don't care about me anymore?" Musian was startled, and then gently hooked his finger. Miss Tiandeo stepped gracefully to Musian's side and looked at him indifferently. "Are you jealous? Logically, you shouldn't have such emotions, right?" Musian looked at the luster flowing in Miss Tiandeo's beautiful eyes and suddenly asked. "I really don't have any emotions, but I'm worried that the master will gradually forget me after getting together with other women. When I think about this, I feel uneasy and sad," Miss Tiandeo said calmly. "This is called jealousy." Musian couldn't help but smile, got up and walked to her side, holding Miss Tiandeo's hand, and comforted her. "Don't worry, I won't abandon you. Even if Tiandeo really comes in the future, I will keep you by my side." Under Musian's comfort, Miss Tiandeo seemed to gradually calm down a lot. Seeing this, Musian asked, "You came to Zhu today, because someone violated the rules of heaven and earth again, so you want to punish the heaven?" "No. Miss Tiandeo said in a calm tone, the fate of the Dogon dynasty has come to an end. According to the requirements of the rules of heaven and earth, there will be a forbidden land to take away the fate of the Dogon country. After that, a new dynasty will come into being under my arrangement. The Dogon dynasty. Musian whispered to herself, and for no reason she thought of the eldest daughter of the emperor, Yongning, who seemed to be always proud and elegant. If the fate of the Dogon dynasty is really coming to an end, what should she do after this? Master, what's wrong with you? Miss Tiandeo's voice brought Musian back to reality. He looked at the majestic goddess-like god in front of him and said with a smile, you are going to the Dacian dynasty next, right? Can I go with you? I want to see how heaven enforces the rules of heaven and earth. In the underworld, the birth of a new dynasty is arranged in the underworld. However, this time, Miss Tiandeo did not agree directly. She hesitated for a moment and said, this does not comply with the requirements of the rules of heaven and earth. Terminal has requested that bystanders are not allowed to watch when doing these things. Musian's eyes darkened, is that so? In your heart, do the rules of heaven and earth still take precedence over me? He waved his hand gently and said, I understand, just go. Miss Tiandeo turned around and walked out of the room, then couldn't help but turn her head and glance at the young man behind her. He sat back on the bed alone, raised his head slightly and looked out the window, with a bit of sadness on his face. Among the withered leaves outside the window, his back seemed to be full of desolation. For some reason, Gu Jing's originally calm state of mind suddenly had some ripples. Miss Tiandeo hesitated for a moment, then finally turned around and walked to Musian's side. Musian looked at her immediately, without saying a word, but with a bit of confusion in his eyes. The rules of heaven and earth do stipulate that others are not allowed to follow. As Miss Tiandeo spoke, she knelt down beside the bed. There seemed to be an inexplicable charm in her voice that was usually too cold and emotionless. She raised her moist and charming eyes and continued, but if you are the master, I am willing to take you with me. Musian's eyes moved slightly, won't this cause you trouble? I can solve these troubles, master, please don't worry. Musian, if you weren't in a bad state today, I would really like to reward you severely. After you go to the Dacian dynasty this time, you can find a time to come see me in the evening. I understand, master, Miss Tiandeo replied calmly. But the corner of her mouth evoked a faint smile. The women around the master are indeed all stunning beauties. But that's all. Miss Tiandeo is different. She is the spokesperson appointed by heaven and the executor of the rules of heaven and earth. Of course, she herself is also within the rules of heaven and earth, and needs to abide by all the rules of heaven and earth. But now it is the master who is requesting her. Everyone in the world is afraid of her, but the master is different. Not only is the master not afraid, he even has pure love and desire for her, and even kisses her. Her current personality is actually an additional personality given by her master's natural furnace. Therefore, if it is for the master, even breaking the rules of heaven and earth once does not seem to be a big deal. This is a big chapter with nearly 6,000 words. Please give me a wave of votes and blades. In the new week it will be reset in 5 days. Another recommended book. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 592. Dagan Dynasty. Imperial Study. The old emperor unfolded the document and reviewed the contents for the first time in a long time, but there was an uneasy feeling between his eyebrows. He glanced at the supervisor of the Imperial Observatory under the stage calmly, and said in a deep voice, "Supervisor, did you see the strange phenomenon before? Are you sure you didn't see it wrong? A few nights ago, 9 stars lit up the night sky above the Dagan dynasty. Natural phenomena should be a sign of good fortune, but on that night, an earthquake occurred in the Dagan dynasty, causing heavy casualties. After that, tsunamis occurred in Dongzhou to the Arctic abyss and the World Sea in the south, and many local people were displaced. It was also on that night that there seemed to be some movement in the major forbidden places, and all parties sent envoys to Dongzhou. Then, the news that the Dagan dynasty was about to end came out. This news was not groundless, because there were similar examples in the past. Whenever a dynasty collapsed, the shadow of the Forbidden Land would always appear behind it. The Forbidden Land was not the real culprit for the destruction of the dynasty, but simply came to recover the dynasty's national destiny. If it were the former demon world, I'm afraid it would never miss this opportunity to attack Dongzhou. After all, when the dynasty was about to collapse, Dongzhou was at its weakest. At this time, if the queen of the demon world was willing, as long as she joined forces with another force to launch a surprise attack, she could easily take down the Dagan dynasty and control the lifeline of Dongzhou. Fortunately, the ruler of the demon world is not as violent as before, otherwise the beautiful snake might swallow the entire dynasty. This is also what the government and the people often say when they are worried. Seeing the white-bearded supervisor nod slowly and determine that his judgment was absolutely correct, the old emperor frowned and stared at him. Supervisor, be careful when speaking, don't spread rumors easily, and make the government and the people uneasy. In a sense, the Imperial Astronomical Observatory is an important place connecting the world of immortal cultivation and the mortal world. Their night observation of the stars is not metaphysics, but it is indeed particular. If the news of Jianzhen's observation spreads, I'm afraid the entire Dagan dynasty will be in turmoil. Your Majesty, I dare not. In fact, when the national teacher was in the past, Dagan's national fortune had already been gradually declining, but your Majesty's mind was not on the court at that time, so. Jianzheng showed bitterness and helplessness. In the past, he had made memorials more than once, hoping that your Majesty could concentrate on the government, but the memorials were returned by Gu Boxing before they were submitted. Because Gu Boxing completely suppressed the Imperial Observatory at that time, this also led to the Imperial Observatory being almost neglected for a long time. It was not until Gu Boxing's death that the Imperial Observatory was reused. But it was too late. Jianzhen noticed the old emperor's increasingly ugly look, and immediately shut up and dared not speak again. National destiny is actually a kind of luck. For the common people, national destiny is almost illusory, but the people of their dynasty know very well that luck is real. Moreover, it affects everyone, even every dynasty. Those who are extremely unlucky will have bad luck happen to them constantly. On the contrary, people with great luck can pick up money when they go out to buy vegetables. This is the effect of luck. The same is true for national luck. It's just that national luck is more complicated than the luck of a cultivator. If the emperor is a wise monarch who knows how to govern the government and let the people live and work in peace and contentment, the national luck will gradually increase, and the dynasty will also be favored by heaven. And if the emperor is a tyrant, the result is self-evident. This is the disadvantage of the human dynasty. Being in a high position, perhaps at the beginning, you are indeed wholeheartedly for the country and the people, but if you are influenced by power for too long, you will always hope to sit in this position for longer. But this is still a world of immortals. No matter who it is, they will hope to be immortal. There are too few emperors who can be consistent and dedicated. At least in the past records of Dongzhou, there has never been even one. The old emperor stared at the supervisor for a long time without speaking. He didn't want to believe what the supervisor said, but he had practiced Taoism with Gu Boxing, so he knew that the so-called national destiny and luck were actually real. In fact, the old emperor had a bad feeling in his heart when the major towns reported disasters not long ago. But when the dynasty was in turmoil, he heard the truth from the supervisor. It was like a heavy hammer hitting the old emperor's heart, making him sit paralyzed on the dragon chair and didn't speak for a long time. Your Majesty. The supervisor looked at the silent old emperor, hesitated, and wanted to say something else. The supervisor of the Imperial Observatory is spreading rumors and trying to shake the foundation of the dynasty. he will be beaten to death. After a while, the indifferent words came from the old emperor's mouth. He didn't even listen to the supervisor's words. He just waved his hand, listened to the supervisors shouting behind him, and turned away. Since the dynasty has begun to collapse, it is better to take away as much national fortune as possible before it is completely destroyed. For the royal officials of the Dogon dynasty, these few days are undoubtedly the most difficult. After all, once the dynasty collapses, officials of the previous dynasty will naturally not be able to continue to the next dynasty. But for the common people in the world, they still have to live as they should. This is the best of times, but also the worst of times. The good thing is that in the world of immortals, with the blessing of elixirs, people's average life expectancy can almost reach 100 years, unless something unexpected happens. The bad thing is that there is a group of powerful people playing chess, fighting openly and secretly. And when they fight, a grain of sand that falls down is like a boulder to the mortal world. At this moment, Musian is walking on the streets of the capital of the Dogon dynasty. The capital of Dogon is obviously much more lively than Tianqian city. There are people coming and going on the streets. Every inn is almost full every day, and the noise is endless. I'm afraid most people don't know that the fate of the Dogon dynasty is coming, right? Musian said with a bit of emotion. Once the dynasty collapses, it will also be the beginning of civil strife. By then, the seemingly peaceful scene of the capital will no longer exist. Miss Tiandao looked calm. Although her face was covered with a veil and she even deliberately changed into a simple robe, she still attracted the attention of many people on the street. No one would have thought that the executor of the heavenly Dao rules would walk openly on the streets of the Dogon dynasty, and even look so close to a cultivator from Dongzhou. Master, are you worried about the people in the mortal world? In fact, you can rest assured. As the executor of the heavenly Dao rules, all living things are my children. I will complete the dynasty change without causing too much damage, Miss Tiandao said in a calm tone. Musian thought for a moment and suddenly asked, by the way, I've always wondered, since most of the dynasties in Dongzhou can't last for more than 1,000 years, why not create an immortal dynasty like Yuzhou? If it weren't for the emperor of the human world ruling the dynasty, the time to maintain the national destiny would be much longer, right? For the heavenly Dao, isn't peace in Zhou more important than anything else? Miss Tiandao replied expressionlessly, for the heavenly Dao, maintaining the stability of the rules of heaven and earth is far more important than peace in Zhou. After the destruction of Zhou, a new Zhou will be born, but if the rules of heaven and earth collapse, the three ways of heaven, earth, and man will be destroyed. Dongzhou is too powerful. The original intention of the heavenly Dao is to hope that Zhou can achieve a delicate balance, rather than a single dominant power. Besides, the leader of the Lianji sect doesn't like to interfere with the human dynasty. The master has been in the Lianji sect for so long, he should also know what Dao Feng is practicing, right? Musian nodded gently. Dao Feng practices the law of nature, and everything is about following the laws of nature. The sect master herself is proficient in the art of the 9 peaks. In the final analysis, the Dao rhyme of the 9 peaks was passed down by her, and each Dao can be combined with Dao when it reaches the end. Although it sounds so metaphysical, Musian guessed that the sect master practiced the law of nature, so following the law of nature should be only one of the reasons. More importantly, the sect master did not want his existence to be noticed by the heavenly Dao, so he never interfered with anything in Dongzhou. Although the reason is unclear, from the current performance, the taboo rules set by the Lianji sect, the 9 fairy gold locks that the sect master suspected of self-restraint, and her body never leaving the Lianji sect may all be for the purpose of not being noticed by the heavenly Dao. Therefore, the will of the heavenly Dao was so surprised when it entered the Lianji sect that day. She did not expect that the entire Lianji sect was not within the rules. The sect master does not interfere with the Dogon dynasty because of the law of nature, But why do other ancient forces never interfere with the Dogon dynasty? Musian suddenly asked. Miss Tiandeo said calmly, before the abdication of the Emperor of Dogon, he symbolized the national destiny of Dogon. If the powerful people of the ancient forces controlled him or killed him, they would be backfired by the national destiny. Even the powerful people would suffer great backfires from the destiny. No one would be willing to do such a thankless task. Musian understood. This was the same as the past Yayu and other chosen people. Because they were people with great destiny, under the constraints of the rules of heaven and earth, the powerful people of Hedeo could not easily attack them. This is also to balance the situation in Juzhu. Every time a dynasty collapsed, the Forbidden Land would appear to recover the national destiny of Dongzhou, Musian suddenly asked. Miss Tiandeo nodded gently. National destiny is much more precious than the master imagined. Every time a dynasty collapsed in the past, the Forbidden Land would send envoys to compete for national destiny. The last time the national destiny was taken away by the immortal Forbidden Land. Immortal Forbidden Land, Musian recalled the sexy queen with wheat-colored skin in his mind. After the death of the messenger sent by the immortal Lord Isis, there seemed to be no other movement in the immortal Forbidden Land, and the other Forbidden Lands seemed to be silent all of a sudden. I think the news that the two Forbidden Lands joined forces to attack Musian not long ago leaked out, making the other Forbidden Lands afraid. Since you are the executor of the rules of heaven and earth, do you know who the body of doom that appears every time a dynasty falls? Is it the same person, or a different person every time? Musian suddenly asked. This time, Miss Tiandeo was unable to answer, but shook her head with regret. Sorry, Master, all the heavenly punishments in this world are executed by me, but the body of doom that appears after the fall of the dynasty is an exception. Because after the fall of the dynasty, the heavenly Deo will descend on Juzhu for a period of time. Will the heavenly Deo descend? Musian was stunned for a moment, and then shuddered slowly. My guess was right. The heavenly Deo's so-called punishment of the body of misfortune was just an excuse. If my guess was right, the heavenly Deo simply wanted to take this opportunity to let its true body descend upon Kyushu. When Musian thought of this, he suddenly felt his hair stand on end. It is said that the heavenly Deo is ruthless. Now that I think about it, it would be a good thing if the heavenly Deo is really ruthless. What if the heavenly Deo has feelings, and even has the 7 emotions and 6 desires of humans? It would become a god that controls the lifeblood of the entire Kyushu and has its own desires. The power of life and death of all living beings in this world is in the hands of it alone. Just thinking about it makes people feel creepy. Musian took a deep breath to calm himself down, and suddenly asked, when are you going to start the dynasty change? Miss Tiandeo replied calmly, the master seems to have misunderstood. It is not me who artificially changes the dynasty, but after the dynasty is destroyed, I will lead the new dynasty. The rules of heaven and earth are limited, so the way of heaven cannot directly take action and rewrite the dynasty. After all, the rules of heaven and earth are not set by the way of heaven itself, but by the 3 ways of heaven, earth, and man. Mr. Mu, is that you? Before Musian thought about the meaning of Miss Tiandeo's words, he suddenly heard a familiar and pleasant voice in his ears. Musian turned his head and looked at the voice, and saw a stunning woman who had just walked out of an inn. Her face was covered with a translucent veil, slightly covering her beautiful face, and her beautiful eyes stared at him slowly, with some surprise in her eyes, and joy hidden deep in her eyes. Princess Yongning. Musian said in a voice transmission, why are you here? Although the veil worn by the eldest princess was a magic weapon that concealed her breath, the natural spirit body could still detect the familiar breath on her body, and Musian immediately identified the other party's identity. There were many guests coming and going in front of the inn, and some people's eyes swept over Musian and others. Although the 2 women had veils covering their true faces, it was not difficult to guess that they must be great beauties just by their temperament. This also made them more curious about the identity of this young man. Princess Yongning looked at the woman next to Muzian with doubts, and soon noticed the gazes of these passers-by, and said with a smile, "I wonder if Mr. Mu is free? It's not convenient to talk here. If you don't mind, please follow me to the palace." Muzian glanced at Miss Tiandeo and saw that she didn't seem to have any expression, so he nodded gently. The three of them took an ordinary carriage and stopped not far from the palace, and then changed to the palace's carriage and drove into the palace leisurely. "When I want to go out of the palace occasionally, I will dress up a little like this, and usually no one will stop me." In the slightly shaking carriage, Princess Yongning took off her veil, revealing a graceful and beautiful face, and smiled at Muzian with a reserved and elegant smile. When she said this, her eyes stayed on the woman next to Muzian for a moment, and asked in confusion, "Who is this?" "This person is here to see the Dogon dynasty off." Of course, no matter what he thought, Muzian naturally couldn't say Tiandeo's identity so bluntly. Muzian smiled and said, "She is a friend of mine, but she doesn't like to talk much." He paused and changed the subject. "The Dogon dynasty has been in turmoil recently. Does Princess Yongning have any important things to do? It is very dangerous to leave the palace during this sensitive period." Princess Yongning said softly, "There have been rumors in the palace recently. They all say that the strange phenomenon in the sky is an ominous sign. In the past, the dynasties were replaced shortly after the ominous sign came. It is also rumored that the outside world is also turbulent now, so I want to come out and see for myself." When he said this, the elegant smile in the past seemed to be restrained a little, and there was a bit of sadness on his beautiful face. "Although my father was devoted to cultivating immortals and had no intention of governing the government in the past, who would want to see his country eventually fall?" She quickly adjusted her thoughts and looked at Muzian and said, "Mr. Mu would not come to the capital for no reason. I think there must be something important, right? Is there anything I can help with? Yongning has always kept Mr. Mu's kindness in mind, so if there is anything you need help with, please tell me." Muzian smiled and said, "Actually, I came to the Dogon dynasty this time, and I do have something I want to ask Princess Yongning for help." Under Princess Yongning's puzzled eyes, Muzian spoke again. "I want to go to the library of the Dogon dynasty to take a look." Library plot, I already have a picture. Warm TI. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 593. The carriage stopped near the library of the Dogon dynasty. After Princess Yongning dismissed the nearby attendants, Muzian stepped into the library with her, which looked quite luxurious. "Is it okay for Master Mu to let your friends stay outside?" Princess Yongning looked at Muzian with gentle eyes and asked softly. Muzian smiled gently, "Princess, don't worry, she won't be noticed by the attendants of the palace. If the will of heaven is willing, no one in this world can detect her breath, let alone a few monks in the mortal world." Princess Yongning nodded at ease after hearing this. After dressing up, she put on a palace dress with a dignified and elegant manner. Her hair was tied up with a jade hairpin. With every step she took, the golden hairpin in her hair swayed gently, and the light golden tassel seemed to shine with a charming luster in the dim light. "Princess, you have traveled all the way and specially brought me to the library. I am sorry for causing you a lot of trouble." Muzian's tone was full of sincere apology. Princess Yongning smiled brightly, "Mr. Mu always likes to be so polite. If it weren't for you last time in the restricted area, I am afraid I would not have been able to return from the restricted area now." Muzian shook his head and said, "That was the credit of Sister Lingxian. I didn't do anything." "But didn't the princess of the restricted area release him for your sake?" Princess Yongning smiled lightly and said, "After that, the prince was scolded by my father and was punished to be confined for a full 6 months. He hasn't come out yet. Although the old emperor didn't care about the government, it didn't mean that his brain was really not working. Some important news in the palace were told to him by spies. He didn't care about the struggle for power and even killing each other among his children, but if he offended a behemoth like the restricted area, then the nature would be completely different. So Mr. Mew, you don't have to be so modest. You can get the princess of the restricted area to release people in person. This is also part of your own strength, Princess Yongning said softly. Her peach blossom eyes flashed with water, and she looked at Muzian deeply. It seemed that she remembered what happened after she went to see him before saying goodbye in the restricted area that day. Her pretty face couldn't help but blush slightly, and she turned her head to continue leading the way. Her earrings swayed gently with her elegant steps. Her back was slender. Although her palace dress was a little bloated, it could not hide her elegant and noble temperament. Muzian followed Princess Yongning silently. There was no one in the library. The sun shone through the window, and the dust turned up and down in the sun. It seemed that the smell of books, paper, and ink was faintly filled. At this time, Princess Yongning suddenly opened her red lips and broke the silence. Mr. Mew, what information are you going to look up in the library this time? I have read a lot of books in the library in the past, maybe I can help you. When she said the last sentence, she turned her head to look at the young man behind her. In such a short time, she had already restrained her inner emotions very well and turned into the Princess Yongning of the past again. Noble and elegant. Muzian came back to his senses and smiled. In fact, I have some interest in the history of the dynasties of Dongzhou recently, and this time I came to the Dogon dynasty for this. However, Princess Yongning pursed her lips and smiled lightly. Mr. Mew is interested in the dynasties of Dongzhou, or is he concerned about how the dynasties of Dongzhou were destroyed? Muzian's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. How do you know? Recently, many monks from other places have come to the capital. I believe Mr. Mew should have noticed this when he was on the street just now, Princess Yongning asked. Muzian nodded softly. There are indeed too many people in the capital this time, so many that it is a bit unreasonable. More importantly, many of these people are cultivators, and they are not cultivators from Dongzhou. Obviously, they all heard that the national destiny will become ownerless after the dynasty is overthrown, so they came from all over Zhou one after another, hoping to get a share of the pie. There is only one reason to come to the Dogon dynasty at this sensitive time. Princess Yongning's eyes were a little more complicated, and she whispered, Mr. Mew, are you also here for the national destiny? National destiny? Do you think I need that kind of thing? Muzian couldn't help but smile and slowly spread his palm. What came into view was a palm-sized stone tablet. He gently threw the stone tablet, and the stone tablet instantly became about the same size as a bookcase. Under the gaze of Princess Yongning, Muzian reached out to touch the stone tablet. A pink and golden light suddenly rose to the sky, and the soft halo seemed to cover the entire library. A person with great luck, Princess Yongning said subconsciously. After devouring 3 chosen people, Muzian now suppressed Lan Feiying, the system holder, and has become a person with great luck. Although he transferred all this huge luck to Wei Mengru to suppress the bad luck in her body, he himself more or less benefited from Wei Mengru's feedback. Just this little bit of luck can make him a person with great luck, but the luck of 4 chosen people cannot completely suppress Wei Mengru's bad luck. This is enough to imagine how amazing Wei Mengru's bad luck is. Under Princess Yongning's slightly absent-minded eyes, Muzian reached out and put the test tablet back into the ring, raised his head and smiled. Princess, do you still think that I came for the national destiny? Yongning couldn't help but raise his head and glance at him a few more times, and then ask subconsciously, if it's not for the national destiny, then why did Mr. Mew come to the Dacian dynasty? She was a little hasty before going out. She only dressed up a little. However, even so, she was still beautiful, with picturesque eyebrows and plump lip lines. She wore a dark palace dress embroidered with gold silk and a gold walking rocker on her head, which also adds a bit of noble and mature charm to her elegant appearance. "Who do you think I am for?" Musian said suddenly, staring at her quietly. Princess Yongning was slightly startled, her beautiful eyes flickered at first, and then she quickly lowered her eyes under Musian's gaze, turned away, only gave him a beautiful profile, and whispered, "Mr. Mu, stop joking, I am asking you seriously." Musian couldn't help but laugh. "I'm not kidding, does the princess think Mu would make such a joke? Have you forgotten how you teased me before leaving the restricted area that day?" Princess Yongning was speechless for a moment. She didn't know what she was thinking at the time. She just heard that the saint from the Swanyan temple kept praising Musian for how good-looking she was, so she took a few more looks. Princess Yongning didn't think she was a face control person, but for some reason she felt that this person's appearance suited her liking. On the one hand, this hobby is influenced by the nine-tailed sky fox, and on the other hand, it is also because Musian saved her when she was in the restricted area when she was most confused and helpless. From a small character that she was not optimistic about at the beginning to now, Musian's growth experience can be regarded as quite legendary. Anyway, let me take you to the second floor first. The ancient books and information Mr. Mu wants to see are stored in the secret room on the second floor. After Princess Yongning finished speaking, she turned and walked towards the second floor. She walked faster and faster, her palace clothes dancing gently with her steps, her plump breasts swaying slightly, and the golden tassels in her hair swaying. Seeing that the eldest daughter of the emperor, who had always been steady and dignified, had such a flustered side, Musian couldn't help but show an interesting smile, and immediately stood up and followed her into the secret room on the second floor. Princess Yongning placed a stack of ancient books in front of Musian, and then planned to leave. Musian couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. "Princess is leaving." Princess Yongning glanced at him and said softly, "If people in the palace find out, I'm afraid there will be a lot of gossip, so will anyone still pay attention to us now?" Musian couldn't help but ask with a smile. Yongning was speechless for a moment. This is true. Nowadays, the Dacian dynasty is constantly experiencing turmoil, and news is spreading everywhere that Dacian is exhausted. Even those who used to dislike Princess Yongning now only want to find other ways out as soon as possible. Yongning sat opposite Musian again, and also took out a thin ancient book and flipped through it. Musian glanced at the contents of the ancient book and asked casually, "The outside world is rumoring that the fate of the Dacian dynasty is imminent, but Her Royal Highness looks calmer than expected. Did you have a premonition, or do you have it? What's the solution?" "Mr. Mu is used to making fun of people. I'm just a prostitute. Even if I really want to reverse the situation, I can't do it, right?" Princess Yongning said calmly, "but if it were me, I would first send troops to provide disaster relief and appease the people. Actually, I have always felt that the fate of the Dacian dynasty is not over yet, but once this rumor comes out, if it is not eradicated as soon as possible, even if it is false, it will become true." Mu Jian's thoughts moved slightly, and he suddenly remembered what Miss Tiandao said before. She said that the Dacian dynasty's energy was exhausted, but in the final analysis, whether it was exhausted or not, could it be determined by Miss Tiandao's words alone? Assume that when Dacian's energy is exhausted, the Emperor of Dacian manages the dynasty in an orderly manner. What will happen next? Are there constant natural disasters? If this is the case, it is not that Dacian's qi has been exhausted, but that heavens will artificially end Dacian's qi. Just as he was thinking about such a thing, Musian's eyes suddenly fell on a sentence in an ancient book. This is a record about the previous dynasty of Dacian. In this dynasty, the last line marked a sentence: "On the day the dynasty fell, the glory of heaven enveloped the 9 states, and it purified the body of misfortune until the body of misfortune perished and the glory dimmed." What does this sentence mean? After the body of misfortune is born, heaven will stay in Kyushu until the heavenly punishment comes and kills the body of misfortune before leaving. Why? How could a mere body of misfortune be taken so seriously by heaven? Musian looked at this sentence, frowned secretly, and fell into deep thought. But just now Musian was thinking about something. Since the way of heaven will only come when the dynasty is destroyed, does that mean that as long as the dynasty is not destroyed, the way of heaven cannot appear? The emperor at that time was fatuous and incompetent, and the prince used to indulge in excessive sexual activities and play tricks, but now he is imprisoned in the East Palace. It is necessary to find a mature and stable person who knows how to manage government affairs. Only by promoting such a person to the position can the current situation of Dakian be stabilized. Musian subconsciously looked at the young mature woman Yongning sitting across the table. It seems that because she didn't get enough rest in the past few days or because she was tired from the journey, Yongning held the ancient book in her hand and read it, and slowly lay on the table, and the fullness and softness of her chest also rested on the table, a few strands of hair scattered on her delicate and pretty face, and her peach blossom eyes seemed to be more charming. She seemed to have noticed Musian's sight, followed his sight, and fell on herself. Her snow-white and cold face was quickly stained with a blush, and she sat up again, with her waist straight. "Sorry, I was a little too tired just now." But this person didn't have the demeanor of a nobleman at all. Who would stare at someone's face all the time? Obviously, he looks very good, with a kind of harmless and well-behaved feeling. It turns out that you can't judge a person by appearance. Princess Yongning quickly gathered her thoughts, coughed lightly, and said seriously, "Mr. Mu, have you found the information you want?" Musian nodded gently, "I guess so." He still couldn't figure out whether the body of doom referred to the same person or different people, but one thing was certain now: no matter what, the heavenly Dao could not be allowed to exploit loopholes in the rules and descend on Jizhu. Musian didn't know why he was targeted by the heavenly Dao, but he knew without thinking. If the heavenly Dao really descended, it would definitely find ways to kill Musian first. Last time he was lucky and successfully attacked the heavenly Dao's will and used the natural furnace to distort the heavenly Dao's will. But if he faced the heavenly Dao, I'm afraid he wouldn't even have the chance to get close to him. Princess Yongning, I seem to have asked you before, but I want to confirm it again. Musian stared at the dignified and mature eldest daughter in front of him and said, "Are you interested in the position of the Dagon dynasty?" Yongning was stunned for a moment. After a while, a strange color flashed in her eyes, her red lips opened slightly, and she whispered something. There is no doubt that for Musian, supporting Yongning to take the throne is the most reliable plan. At least among the people he knows, only Yongning is the most suitable candidate. While Musian was secretly preparing for the throne, Yao Meng, who was reading ancient books at his desk in the Yaoqi Holy Land, heard someone's request not long ago and suddenly heard the news that Musian was going to the Dagon dynasty. There have been constant turmoil in the Dagon dynasty in recent days, and various forces have secretly sent people to watch, and the Yaoqi Holy Land is no exception. Yao Meng was not surprised by Musian's going there. If the records in the ancient books are correct, every time a dynasty collapses, there is a possibility that the way of heaven will come. Whether for Wei Mengru or for himself, Musian must go to the Dagon dynasty. Let Yao Yu represent Yao Qi to the Dagon dynasty. If necessary, allow Yao Yu to unconditionally support any of his choices. Holding the ancient book in his hand, Yao Meng whispered to the disciple beside him. The female disciple was startled for a moment, then muttered to herself, "What if Mr. Mu makes some strange requests?" Yao Meng was startled, then laughed and shook her head, "No, just do as I tell you." Mu Lang is indeed not very reliable, but Yao Yu is one of the top talents among the saints of Yao Qi in history, and she has mastered the way of meditation. If Yao Yu is given some time, it is not impossible for her to achieve her previous achievements. She herself fell in love with Musian because the way of meditation had come to an end, so she could do whatever she wanted. But Yao Yu's way of meditation has just begun, and it is impossible for her to be shaken by the love between men and women. Yao Meng is still very relieved about the descendant of Yao Qi. Go down, she said softly, flipping through a page of the ancient book again, and her eyes swept over the description in the ancient book. After reading for a while, Yao Meng seemed a little tired, and took out another book. There is a way to control your husband. This book is so perfect. If she didn't know that Shang Yanfei and Musian had never had any relationship, she would even doubt whether the ways of playing written by that woman were all her own personal experiences. From the indescribable ball to silk stockings, to how to tease a man and make him bow down under her pomegranate skirt. Even in the latest chapter, it is already a candle. But what kind of play is this? Yao Meng's eyes swept through the latest chapter of The Way to Control Your Husband leisurely. The more she read, the more surprised she was in her heart, until the end, her eyebrows couldn't help but frown slightly. How could Shang Yanfei, this woman, think of so many strange ways of playing, and she obviously didn't even leave the sect for a moment. Yao Meng casually threw the book in her hand on the table, disdainful. In any case, this kind of play is too messy. She is the human emperor of the Yahua realm, one of the only 3 Yahua realm ninjas who, how could she be willing to let a little guy bully her like this? She could even imagine how excited Musian would be, and how obsessed he would be looking at her. Yao Meng's fingertips gently touched her red lips, and a hint of moist light flowed in her beautiful eyes that used to be cold. Why not try it next time? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 594. In fact, if Princess Yongning told Musian that she had no interest in the throne of the Dogon dynasty, Musian might not believe it. Because Musian could get a glimpse of it in his past conversations with Yongning. Of course, even so, Musian still needed to confirm it again. And Yongning did give him the answer he wanted. She wanted to become the Empress of Dogon. What does Master Mu plan to do? Princess Yongning stared at him with her beautiful eyes. Do you want my father to abdicate directly? You should know that all cultivators in the world of immortal cultivation cannot interfere with the decision of the Emperor of the mortal world, otherwise they will be backfired by the national destiny brought by the rules of heaven and earth. This is a layer of insurance set up by the 3 ways of heaven, earth, and man, so that the world of immortal cultivation in Zhu will not affect the order of the human dynasty. Musian smiled faintly. I will help Princess Yongning become a great empress. As for the methods, there are actually many ways, but I need to think about it carefully. Looking at Musian's mysterious smile, Princess Yongning's eyes were full of doubts and curiosity, and she was about to ask. At this time, Musian suddenly put his finger on his lips and said, hush. Someone is coming, don't expose me here. Musian used the method of voice transmission this time, and then got under the table without waiting for Yongning to speak. Yongning's shoulders suddenly trembled slightly because he felt the boy's head resting on his knees. Mr. Mu, what's wrong? She asked subconsciously, rubbing her legs uncomfortably, always feeling an inexplicable sense of shame. However, just after asking the question, seeing that Musian did not respond, Yongning stopped talking. The eldest princess was very smart and knew that Musian must have a reason for doing this. It seemed that someone he didn't want to face had come to the palace. But who is it? Princess, I don't think I disturbed your leisurely reading, did I? At this moment, a soft and pleasant voice suddenly sounded, and Yongning's attention was focused on the person who spoke. It was a woman with wheat-colored skin and exotic clothes. Her charming face was covered with a careless smile, her beautiful eyes gazed slowly, revealing a pair of slender and sexy legs, and playing with 2 things like glass beads in her hands. Who are you? Yongning asked subconsciously. At this moment, she finally knew why Musian hid. Obviously, she was also a cultivator of the 8th level of soul refining, but she could not feel any breath fluctuations from this woman. Lord of the immortal Forbidden Land, you can call me Isis. The woman showed a charming smile, walked to Yongning and sat down. Isis observed Yongning's calm expression with interest, and there was a little more appreciation in her eyes. Not bad, you can still stay calm after knowing my identity. You are much better than most of the powerful children in your royal family. Yongning replied without humility, thank you for the praise, senior. Yongning is very nervous. I wonder if you have any instructions for me to come to Yongning. Isis narrowed her eyes and stared at Yongning for a long time. For a moment, Yongning felt as if he was stared at by a poisonous snake, and his heart rarely fluctuated, and an emotion called fear filled his heart. She wants to kill me. For some reason, this thought came to the mind of the eldest daughter of the emperor. At this time, she suddenly felt a hand on her calf, and the warm palm made Yongning's body tremble slightly, and she almost cried out. But fortunately, she still suppressed it, sorted out her emotions a little, lowered her eyes slightly, and maintained her usual calm and dignified appearance. Isis collected her thoughts and chuckled, nothing, I just came to the Dogon dynasty and heard that the eldest princess of Dogon is very smart, so I came here out of curiosity. By the way, I also want to ask, what does Princess Yongning think of the current rumors about Dogon? Yongning said calmly, I think the rumors that Dogon is about to end are untrue. Although Dogon is in some internal turmoil now, it is still far from the point of end. Isis stared at the dignified and cold eldest daughter for a long time, then quietly withdrew her gaze and stood up. I have other things to do today, so I won't disturb the princess' leisure and elegance of reading. After saying that, Isis turned around and turned into a shadow and left. After a while, Musian crawled out from under the table and slowly exhaled. Fortunately, Isis was just a wisp of spiritual consciousness, otherwise his natural spiritual body might not be able to detect the other party's existence at the first time. It seems that the Forbidden Land can no longer hold back. Even Musian did not expect that the national destiny of the Dogon dynasty could attract the attention of the Forbidden Land. Mr. Mu, what do you think she planned to do when she came to me just now? Yongning asked softly. Her beautiful face in the past had lost some color, a few strands of hair set off her fair face, her mouth was thin and rosy, as dignified and elegant as usual, but her curled eyelashes trembled slightly because of fear. Compared to her noble elegance in the past, she had a more weak and helpless little woman's posture, which made her more pitiful. If I guess correctly, Isis should have wanted to support you to take the throne at first. Musian said, looking at Yongning's trembling body, and asked, are you okay? Mr. Mu, please continue, I'm fine, it's just the body's instinctive fear, Yongning said in a low voice. Hearing this, Musian couldn't help but smile and shook his head, is Princess Yongning so disbelieving in me? He said calmly, I said I would support you in your rise to power, and I will protect you until the end. When he said this, Musian extended his hand to her gracefully. Yongning glanced at Musian subconsciously. His expression was very calm, as if he was just talking about an ordinary thing, but for some reason he felt an inexplicable sense of security. After a while, she stretched out her hand and placed it in Musian's palm, letting him hold her hand just like that. The warm breath made the eldest daughter of the emperor subconsciously move closer to Musian. She glanced at Musian slightly, and realized that he was looking at her. Her heart trembled slightly, and she quickly moved away. Sighed. Then, she changed the subject and said, Mr. Mu just said that the Supreme Being of the Forbidden Land wanted to help me rise to power at the beginning, then why did he have murderous intentions for me later? You are very smart, Musian smiled, but Isis doesn't need you to be so smart. In the final analysis, for Isis and even for the major taboo places, their purpose from the beginning was not to support a certain prince or princess to rise to power. Their purpose was to improve the national destiny of Dacian. Musian continued. If I guess correctly, after Isis found you this time, she should also go to meet other people and ask them if they are interested in the emperor's position. Feeling the warm breath of the young man beside her, Yangning's delicate body no longer trembled as before, her eyes flashed with a strange light, and she said softly, "You mean, all the taboo places will be found next? Someone from the royal family?" "It's not a possibility, it's a certainty." Musian smiled. "Of course, their purpose is not really to support someone to rise to power. After all, what the Forbidden Land really wants is national destiny, and that seems to be what heaven needs." Yongning frowned, and then after hearing the voice of Musian's words, a thunder resounded in his mind, and the emperor's eldest daughter's elegant and cold face, as elegant as a jade sculpture, showed violent mood swings for the first time. "The purpose of the Forbidden Land is to completely destroy the Dacian dynasty." Her voice was slightly trembling, and she stared into Musian's eyes. "This is an obvious answer. Recently, there was news that the Dacian dynasty was on its way out. Soon after that, all parties came to the Dacian dynasty, hoping to get a piece of the pie, even the Forbidden Land. People are coming to a place that has always been isolated from the world, which is enough to explain certain problems." Yongning was still wondering about something before. Although the Dacian dynasty seems to be in civil strife now, this kind of civil strife has not happened in the past, and it is basically manageable. Under such circumstances, why did the people of the Kintian prison give a prediction that the Dacian dynasty would be destroyed after spying on the secrets of heaven? Now it seems that the answer has been answered. The forces of all parties and even the emergence of taboo places may be the root cause. Seeing Musian nod lightly, Yongning was still a little unbelievable and said softly, "But if you do this, won't you be counterattacked by the rules of heaven and earth? Great power cannot interfere with the human dynasty in the world of mortals. This is the rule set by the three realms of heaven, earth, and man. Perhaps they have some way to avoid the backlash." Musian shook his head. This involved a blind spot in his knowledge. Maybe Miss Tiandeo will know. After all, the creation of the Forbidden Land was the work of heaven. Yongning calmed down his thoughts slightly, then raised his eyes to look at Musian, and said softly, "What are Mr. Mu's plans next?" "Stay in the capital temporarily and wait and see what happens," Musian said. He could not leave the capital for the time being until he confirmed how many taboo places he had visited this time and successfully stabilized the situation. Yongning hesitated for a moment, then suddenly said softly, "If you don't mind, Mr. Mu can stay in my palace for a few days." Musian was startled. "Isn't this not good? If people find out, I'm afraid there will be a lot of gossip. I'm in the inn in the capital, so it's not too troublesome to meet the princess. The most important thing is that he is a little afraid of being alone. It seems that it will not be good if he accidentally does something without restraint." Musian is very self-aware of himself. He has naturally had thoughts about the eldest daughter of the emperor, who is always dignified and mature, but you must know that he promised Yongning to help her. If he is with her, while living in the palace, I couldn't help but want to do something to Yongning. Will she refuse? I don't think so. After all, this time is related to the fate of the Dacian dynasty. Even if it is for the sake of the Dacian dynasty, it is impossible for the eldest daughter of the emperor to refuse. But this way, the relationship deteriorated a bit, as if he had coerced her. What Musian hopes is to be able to develop naturally with her and win her in a logical manner, rather than using means similar to coercion and inducement. Does Mr. Mu dislike my low cultivation level and feels it is too embarrassing to be with me? Musian noticed that the pupils of Her Royal Highness the Princess were a little dim. Musian said helplessly, "Your Highness the Princess has misunderstood. I just don't want the relationship between you and me to deteriorate because of this incident. In my palace, feelings will deteriorate." Yongning looked at Musian in confusion. "Of course not in the Princess Palace, but..." Muzian suddenly lowered his head slightly and whispered something in her ear. Yang Ning's beautiful eyes suddenly widened a bit, and her pretty face quickly turned red. She glanced at the young man beside her, then lowered her head and stopped talking. When Muzian saw this, he couldn't help but reveal an interesting smile. He didn't expect that Yang Ning, who could remain rational in front of Isis, would be disturbed by such a few words. It was really interesting. "Princess, if there is nothing else, I will go back first." After Muzian finished speaking, he turned around and planned to leave. At this time, a hand suddenly grabbed the corner of his clothes. "If you really have that idea, it doesn't matter, after all, it's all of my own free will." Immediately afterwards, a voice so soft that it was almost inaudible sounded in the quiet library. Yang Ning showed a shy but charming smile. She said softly again, "I know that Mr. Mu doesn't take my strength seriously. If Mr. Mu is worried that I am getting close to you because of profit, there is no need to worry. I don't like you because of profit. Yours." As early as that day in the restricted area, when Miss Lin kept mentioning Mr. Mu in front of me, I have been paying attention to you secretly. In a sense, it was also thanks to Ku. If she hadn't been praising Mu Jian for how good-looking and outstanding he was that day, she wouldn't have been secretly observing Mu Jian since then. And I won't even fall in love with him because of this. This time he came to the Dacian dynasty specially for himself. Unlike other forbidden places, he did not come here for the national destiny. But I really want to help her. No girl would dislike a hero who comes to save her when she is in danger, even if he already has a Taoist companion. Before Muzian could react, a soft and delicate body hugged Muzian tightly from behind, and Yang Ning put his hands around his waist. "Mr. Mu, it doesn't matter if you are here." Isis turned into an illusory figure and quietly left the library, about to meet the envoy of the immortal Forbidden Land. At this moment, she suddenly noticed that she could vaguely see a woman's figure not far away in mid-air. The woman was dressed quite plainly, with a veil covering her face, and she didn't exude the slightest breath. Isis glanced twice inadvertently. It always looks a bit familiar. But forget it, the top priority this time is the national destiny of Dacian. As for other things, they can be put aside for the time being. Unless Muzian is also in the Dacian dynasty, nothing is more important than the national destiny of Dacian today. It's a pity that Muzian is now in the Lianji sect and has no chance to make a move. Thinking of the young man with the natural cauldron of the Ascension realm, Isis quickly thought of the slap from the Queen of the Demon realm when she was in the restricted area, and her originally calm state of mind quietly rippled. Teacher Zixuan. "Oh, you may be arrogant and not afraid of offending anyone, but if you knew that Muzian was in my hands, would you still be as arrogant as before?" "It's really exciting." A cold look appeared in Isis's eyes, and her figure completely disappeared into the palace. In the library, sunlight streamed in through the window, and Muzian slowly let go of Yang Ning's red lips. The eldest daughter of the emperor dressed up carefully today. The brightly colored rouge was bitten off, and her pretty face was covered with an intoxicating blush. But his eyes were shining with excitement. As an elegant princess in the past, Yang Ning had never been in love with anyone, let alone kiss someone in a public place like the library, or even allowed his hands to do whatever he wanted. On the one hand, she was worried about being seen by others, but on the other hand, she felt a different kind of excitement because of this worry. This feeling is simply addictive. "Are you still planning to find an in first?" Sensing Muzian's burning gaze, Yang Ning lowered his eyes slightly and asked softly. Muzian smiled, "Since Her Royal Highness the Princess has already warmly invited you, how dare you refuse?" "Do you still call me your Highness Princess?" Yang Ning rolled her eyes at him charmingly, with resentment in her eyes. Muzian was startled, then smiled. "Yang Ning, let's go." Shortly after Tong Yang Ning left the library, Miss Tiandao, who was dressed in plain clothes, quietly came to the boy's side. She glanced at Yongning for a few times with emotionless eyes, and then calmly said to Musian. The immortal lord just discovered me. Has she discovered your identity? Musian asked. Miss Tiandeo shook her head, probably not. It is impossible for anyone in Kyushu to be aware of my identity. But master, I can only provide you with auxiliary help, but I cannot help you directly, Miss Tiandeo reminded. This is bound by the rules of heaven and earth. Unless the other party violates the rules of heaven, I cannot take action. Musian smiled and nodded. I know, you are just like a referee. Of course the referee can't just go off the field and hit someone. When he said this, Musian couldn't help but feel a little regretful. If Miss Tiandeo could end directly, it would be a dimensionality-reducing blow. After all, the forbidden place is the handiwork of heaven. For the human emperor in the Ascension realm, the forbidden lands may all be very difficult enemies. But for Miss Tiandeo, facing the masters of the various taboos is simply like a mother beating her own child, hanging her and beating her. At this time, Musian seemed to have thought of something, and his thoughts suddenly stagnated, staring at Miss Tiandeo's expressionless and beautiful face in a daze. What's wrong, master? Miss Tiandeo tilted her head slightly and asked in confusion. Musian quickly came back to his senses. Well, I just suddenly thought that if the will of the heavenly Deo is equivalent to the referee who judges everything in this world, then of course it is not possible to attack the cultivators of Juz who casually. After all, this is not in line with the rules of heaven and earth. He paused, looked at Miss Tiandeo, and suddenly asked softly. What if someone else attacked the referee first? I didn't expect to close the interpost at the end of the month, alas, but fortunately I started writing the main line recently, so the absence of interposts will not affect the experience, the identity of the sect master, the relationship with the original witch, and the previous pits of the heavenly court can all be filled. There is only 1 day left for the monthly ticket and blade to be reset. I closed the post and there is no feedback. I don't know how well I wrote it. If possible, please give me feedback by voting. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 595. If Miss Tiandeo is the judge in the world, judging all fairness and justice in the world, then as a judge, it is natural that she cannot attack the players at will. But what if someone else attacks her first? The judge cannot hit people, but what if someone else attacks the referee first? As if thinking of something interesting, Musian couldn't help laughing. Master! Miss Tiandeo called out in confusion, with a bit of doubt in her eyes. Musian came back to his senses from his previous thoughts, shook his head and smiled. It's okay, let's go back first. Princess Yongning invited me so kindly, I can't keep refusing. Let's stay in her palace for the next few days. Miss Tiandeo looked at Musian quietly, without saying a word, but her emotionless beautiful eyes seemed to reveal a bit of meaningful color. The bedroom where Yongning lived was at the end of the south side of the palace, a quiet and elegant place. There are only a few confidants in the palace. In Yongning's words, she would rather have fewer people serving her than have too many people and unnecessary gossip. In fact, Musian thought carefully and thought that Yongning might have been interested in the throne a long time ago, so she had been keeping a low profile and never showed her edge. Otherwise, the prince would not have been forced to deal with her personally and sent her to the restricted area. Yongning called a maid and asked her to lead the way for Musian and the others. Then she smiled and said, if Mr. Mu needs anything these days, don't be polite. Just tell the servants to do it, or come to me if you have something. Musian smiled and nodded. Nothing will happen for the time being, but the princess may be busy next time. At this time, Yongning still couldn't hear the meaning of Musian's words, but just looked at him in confusion. But because there were other maids watching, she could only hold back her doubts, and watched Musian leave the hall under the guidance of the maid, and then turned back to her room. On the other side, after the maid left, Musian took out a few pieces of letter paper from the ring and sat in front of the table to write something seriously. After a while, he folded the written letter paper and handed it to Miss Tiendao beside him. "Can you please send these 3 letters?" Musian asked. "I used to ask Sister Mengro, but now she is still in Lianji sect, it is not convenient to find her again." Miss Tiendao silently glanced at the 3 letters on the table, which were written to the Sword Palace, Forbidden Zone and Yaokai Holy Land. "What does the master plan to do?" she asked softly. "You should know that those powerful people cannot interfere with the human dynasties in the mortal world, otherwise they will be backfired by the rules of heaven and earth." Miss Tiendao added again. "Don't worry, I know my limits. I'm just going to spread some rumors now." Musian paused, then continued with a smile, "You haven't changed the dynasty yet, so you should be free now, or are you unwilling?" Miss Tiendao glanced at Musian. Although she is indeed free now, but what the master wants to do now is obviously contrary to her. She came to Jizhu because she wanted to change the dynasty, and what Musian is going to do now is clearly to continue the dynasty's destiny. However, even so, Miss Tiendao finally took the letter. For Miss Tiendao today, changing the dynasty is just a task, and the master's orders are life. In the next 2 days, just as Musian had predicted before, Yangning's palace welcomed the first guest. Yao Yu, the contemporary saint of the Yaokai Holy Land. "Why would Fairy Yao Yu come to the palace to find me?" Yangning's beautiful eyes flickered, and then she quickly reacted, raising her hand to signal the maid to invite Yao Yu into the hall. Yangning looked up and saw the fairy wearing a light white gauze dress and looking more beautiful than snow. Compared with the Green Emperor, Yao Yu seemed less mature and more girlish. Yao Qi was asked by someone, so she decided to be the princess's backer, Yao Yu said with a smile. Someone, Yangning first thought of the young man who was still resting in her palace. At this time, Yao Yu said again in a gentle and calm tone, "But princess, please don't misunderstand. Yao Qi chose to help you, not just for Mr. Mu. The news that the fate of the Dagan dynasty in Dongzhou is coming has spread all over the place. Now many people are watching the fate of Dagan. Once Dagan is destroyed, Dongzhou may usher in an unnecessary fight, so if possible, both I and Yao Qi hope that the fate of Dagan can continue. For this, Dagan needs a wise ruler." Yangning was silent for a long time, and nodded gently, "Thank you, fairy, but is this really okay? If the ancient forces directly interfere in it, won't they be backlashed by the rules of heaven and earth?" "Princess, don't worry about this. In fact, we already have a good solution for this matter." After Yao Yu finished speaking with a smile, she talked to Yangning for a few more words, and then stood up to say goodbye. Yangning stared at the direction where Yao Yu left, and frowned inadvertently. For some reason, she just felt an indescribable weirdness. Logically speaking, if one truly supported her to take the throne, one should have helped her secretly. However, this time Fairy Yao Yu went to the palace to meet her openly and discuss the matter with her. It was as if Yao Qi was eager to let the world know that she supported her. At this time, a maid hurried into the hall, her face full of surprise and excitement. "Princess, the envoys of the Sword Palace and the Forbidden Zone are outside the palace to see you." Yangning's expression finally changed subtly. If the appearance of Yao Qi Holy Land was simply because King Di was backing up her husband, then the Forbidden Zone and the Sword Palace would be together, and the nature would be completely different. At least, these 3 top forces can now rewrite the situation in the entire Jizhu. However, with such a high-profile entry, aren't Yao Qi and other ancient forces afraid that they will be regarded as a thorn in the eyes of other forces in Jizhu? After all, there are more than these 3 real top forces in Jizhu. Yangning shook her head gently, dispelled the thoughts in her mind, and whispered, "Let them in. In any case, everything is up to Master Mu. It is enough for her to do her part now." Unknowingly, 3 days have passed. In the palace of Yangning, Musian played chess with the princess every day, and rewarded Miss Tiandeo and provided her with nutrition. He lived a comfortable life every day, as if he didn't know that other forbidden places were now staring at the Dogon dynasty. While Musian was so relaxed and comfortable, at this moment, someone's face was terribly gloomy. Ningguang, the current crown prince, was the fifth son of the old emperor of Dogon, and his realm was only Qi training. It was not that he didn't work hard to practice since he was a child, but simply because the crown prince's foundation was not good, he was born not suitable for the path of cultivating immortals. Compared with Ningguang, his brothers and sisters all had stronger foundations than him. But Ningguang had one biggest advantage over others, that is, his biological mother was the current queen of Dogon. The eldest prince died young, the second prince's biological mother was of humble status, and the third prince was imprisoned. Now the only one who could compete with the crown prince was the fourth prince Ningzhou. Ningzhou is good at disguising himself, and he has the support of several terrestrial immortals in the Return to Void realm. In addition, he is the prince's brother. The old emperor originally intended to make Ningzhou the prince. But I don't know what method the queen used to make the old emperor change his mind and finally make the fifth prince Ningguang as the prince of Dogon. Because he has the support of many officials in the court, Ningguang has never been at a disadvantage when facing the fourth prince. Even the queen thought that her child would become the emperor of Dogon after the old emperor died. However, who would have thought that the prince who had been invincible in the past would fall once at the hands of Princess Yongning? And just that one time, the advantages he had established in the court in the past disappeared, and even his father was shaken about his position as the prince. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. Sending Yongning and others to the restricted area was originally Ningguang's way of suppressing the second and fourth princes. It was also the queen's idea for him, because the queen had bribed a commander in the restricted area through connections. As long as Yongning and others entered the restricted area, it would be impossible for them to leave the restricted area in a few years. The facts did develop as he thought. Yongning, the second prince and even the fourth prince's men were imprisoned in the restricted area. However, this plan, which should have been foolproof, had a huge change. Musian. Ningguang called out the name softly, with uncontrollable anger and a deep sense of powerlessness in his eyes. Ningguang could not have dreamed that his foolproof plan would be rewritten because of the appearance of one person. The isolated place of the forbidden area should have been the best place to ban Yongning and others. However, the princess of the forbidden area seemed to admire Musian, so much so that she released all the people just when Musian opened his mouth. She even sent people from the forbidden area to the Dogon dynasty to ask for an explanation. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth, he also had a mother who could say a few words in front of the old emperor, and most of the ministers in the court supported him to take the throne. It can be said that the original balance of victory was completely tilted towards Ningguang. However, in the past 2 days, there have been rumors that Yaokai, the Forbidden Area and the Sword Palace are all biased towards Princess Yongning. They even sent envoys to have close conversations with Yongning in private. The three ancient forces all support Yongning to become the Empress of Dogon. This is playing with your mother. Ningguang's mentality collapsed a little when he thought of this. Does the prince seem to be troubled? At this moment, in the quiet East Palace, a shadow suddenly seemed to twist slightly. Then, a thin-looking man quietly appeared in front of Ningguang. He was restrained and looked like an ordinary person, but his eyes seemed to be filled with indifference and vicissitudes of life, staring at Ningguang quietly. Who are you? Ningguang's heart skipped a beat, and after saying this subconsciously, he shouted again. Come here. However, the guards who usually came at a moment's notice seemed not to have heard his call, and there was no sound in the entire palace. Prince, there is no need to shout. I have set up a formation in your palace to isolate you from the outside world. Even if you run outside the palace, you will not see anyone, the man said calmly. You don't have to be nervous. If I want to kill you, you won't even have a chance to speak. Ning Quan felt his rapidly accelerating heartbeat, panting heavily, trying to calm himself down, and asked, "Why do you, a little guy like you, come to me?" The man showed an elegant smile. "First of all, let me introduce myself, the owner of the eternal ancient land. You can call me the Lord of Eternity. I am here to help you." "Help me?" "Yes, help you." The Lord of Eternity smiled and said, "If it weren't for Musian, you should be firmly in the position of Crown Prince now. However, because of his appearance, everything has changed. He now plans to support Princess Yongning to ascend the throne, so Dongzhou's the three major ancient forces are secretly supporting Yongning. You must have heard about this, right?" His tone was always unhurried and unhurried, fully embodying the wise saying of not being hasty is an attitude, as if every word and every action was filled with calmness and indifference. Ning Quan gradually calmed down, still a little unconvinced. "What good will it do to you to help me?" The Lord of Eternity smiled lightly and said, "Actually, benefits and interests are not the only things that can drive others to do things in this world. It's just that it makes me uncomfortable to see Tian Tian Furnace doing everything smoothly, so I don't want him to support Yongning to rise to power. That's all." "So, is he Musian's enemy?" Ning Quan seemed to have grasped the last straw and stared at the Lord of Eternity. "What do I need to do to make a comeback?" "Princess Yongning now has Musian behind her, so the Sword Palace, the Forbidden Zone, and even the Yaokai Holy Land are all on her side. If you just talk about the power behind her, of course you can't compare to her." The Lord of Eternity smiled, "But we powerful people cannot interfere in the affairs of the mortal world. In recent years, your father has been devoted to cultivating Taoism and has no time to care about government affairs. Your mother must have planted many spies for you secretly and paved the way for you. Even in the court, you have an advantage that no other prince or princess has." Under Ning Quan's intense gaze, the Lord of Eternity slowly said two words from his mouth. "Military power." Musian was lying in Miss Tiandao's arms, enjoying the soft knee pillow, and said slowly, "In the past few days, I have to go to the Sword Palace and the restricted area, and even rush to the Yaokai Holy Land. It's really hard on you." The cold and beautiful Miss Tiandao bent her knees slightly and said calmly, "I have no intention of being tired, Master." She continued, "However, almost all the taboo lands are now gathered in the Dacian dynasty. Today, 3 taboo lords have entered the palace. It should be as the Master expected. They went to find some princes and princesses to cooperate." Musian nodded slightly, not surprised by this. "If you want to gain the national fortune of Dacian, you must make use of these royal dignitaries in the Forbidden Land." Musian had already guessed this a few days ago. "Master, what are you going to do next?" Miss Tiandao asked softly. "Do you know what dating is?" Playing with Miss Tiandao's silky hair, Musian suddenly asked with a smile. Miss Tiandao closed her eyes slightly, and after searching her mind for a while, she slowly opened her eyes. "Dating means that after an agreed time, male and female friends go out to play and eat together. It is a very happy thing. Who does the Master plan to date?" "Going on a date. What do you think?" Musian smiled and looked at Miss Tiandao in front of him. Isis sat quietly in a quiet room with 2 futons, a table, and nothing else. The maid accompanying this time quietly walked into the quiet room, bowed respectfully, and said, "Master. The 4th prince should have agreed, right?" Isis asked with a soft voice without opening her eyes. "Yes, I was very excited when I learned that you were willing to help him become the Emperor of Dacian. He also said that he would follow your lead in the future," the maid said respectfully. "Men are like this kind of Jianzuka who are full of lies and like to deceive. Musian is like this, the fourth prince is the same, and any man is like this. Isis lazily stretched her waist, showing off her sexy and plump figure, and casually ordered, "Keep an eye on other taboo places, lest the national destiny be taken away by them in the end. I will also pay attention to Dakian during this period, every move in the dynasty. Yes, by the way, master, there is one more thing." The maid stopped talking, glanced at Isis, and hesitated. "Speak directly," Isis said calmly. "I seem to have seen Musian on the way back from the palace just now." The maid whispered. Isis's eyes opened suddenly and she stared at the maid. "In the immortal forbidden land, he is also in the Dakian dynasty." She asked again, "Where is he now?"